My boss spent 11 months humiliating me at work. Now she had to live in my apartment because saving her life magically tied her body to mine. If she stayed more than 50 feet away from me for 45 minutes, her body would begin shutting down. That meant Corinne Maddox, the woman who timed my bathroom breaks, buried me in unpaid overtime, and threatened my job whenever I talked back, could no longer leave my side. She was standing in my kitchen wearing my spare hoodie while I explained that cruel bosses slept on the couch and paid 1/3 of the rent. But Corinne's sudden dependence on me was not even the strangest part. After I pulled her dead body from a wrecked car and brought her back to life, she opened her eyes and claimed she was no longer Corinne. She called herself Nerissa, the Ember Empress. She expected servants, a royal palace, and complete obedience. Instead, she got my broken couch, an overdue rent notice, and the employee her body could no longer survive without. And before sunrise, armed men would arrive to take her away from me. They already knew about the 50-foot tether. One of them even knew my name. To understand why my cruel boss ended up trapped in my apartment, we need to go back 90 minutes, to the moment I found her dead inside a wrecked car. At 10:40 Tuesday night, I left Maddox Tower with a dead phone, my laptop, and another overnight demand. Metal tore behind the divider. Corinne's sedan had buried itself in concrete. One clean black slice split the driver's door. I dropped the laptop and ran. Corinne hung against the belt with blood under her hair. She was not breathing. I cut her free and checked her pulse. Nothing. Her cruelty had cost me 11 months. I refused to let it cost her life. I started compressions. On the third cycle, a gold thread hit my wrist and sank into Corinne's chest. Her back arched. Defiance system on mime. Barrier marks 31. Corinne opened gold eyes and grabbed for my throat. A curved shell caught her hand an inch from my skin. Gravel jumped across the road. I trapped her wrist, stepped across her balance, and pinned her against the damaged car. She had always preferred public humiliation. I preferred leverage. The stranger inside Corinne studied my grip. Her eyes moved to my hand, then back to my face, waiting for obedience. Then the stranger finally spoke. "Release me. I am Nerissa, the Ember Empress." I tightened the wrist lock. "Tate Holloway, reliability engineer. Your body is bleeding." Nerissa's eyes narrowed. "You touched this vessel without permission. You were dead. Permission had poor timing." Nerissa twisted with enough force to bend the car door. I shifted, let her strength pass, and put her back against the frame. The gold shell flashed again, but the mark count stayed hidden. Good! The universe had given me a shield and no manual. Very on brand. Nerissa looked past me at the traffic lights and distant towers. "What province is this?" "Havenport, United States." Nerissa tested the words like they had insulted her ancestors. "Where is my court?" She opened one hand toward the wreck. The air warmed. A gold spark formed over her palm, shook once, and died. Pain crossed Corinne's face before Nerissa buried it. The Empress had strength, skill, and a body that could barely stand. Her old power had missed the trip. I nodded toward the dead spark. "Strong court!" Nerissa seized the front of my shirt. "Mock me again and I will remove your spine by hand." "So the magic is down but customer service remains." Her grip tightened. The barrier brightened between us. She released me before another rule had to prove itself. "I have a 2-bedroom apartment and overdue rent. Adjust expectations." She stared at my clothes, the wreck, then the lighted skyline. Then her chin lifted. Nerissa lifted Corinne's chin. "You will take me to shelter, servant." I picked up my laptop. "I worked for Corinne. I do not work for whoever borrowed her face." Nerissa stepped after me and nearly dropped. Her knee buckled. Blood ran down her temple. The ancient ruler had inherited a concussed executive and zero patience. I caught her before her skull hit the curb. Nerissa's fingers closed around my sleeve. "You will forget that." "Absolutely. Right after payroll forgets my overtime." I reached for my phone to call for help. The battery stayed black. Nerissa looked toward the empty road. Others were here. I stopped joking. I glanced at the clean slice in the car door. No second vehicle remained. No witness waited nearby. I could leave Corinne's body beside the wreck and hope ordinary help arrived first. I could also carry the only person who had seen the gold light somewhere with locks. I chose locks. A delivery driver slowed beside us and lowered his window. The driver saw Corinne bleeding and reached for his phone. Nerissa raised one hand. Gold gathered faintly under Corinne's skin. I caught her wrist before she could test ancient murder on gig labor. Every vehicle here records faces. Hurt him, and half the city sees Corinne do it before breakfast. Nerissa glanced at the small camera near his mirror. Her hand lowered 1 inch. The driver asked whether I needed emergency help. I kept my body between him and Nerissa. "Her family is sending someone. Please clear the road." He left fast. Smart man. Nerissa watched the taillights. "Your people imprison themselves inside seeing stones. Yes, we call them cameras. They make public murder terrible for careers." She looked at me with fresh irritation. Information had become my first usable weapon. My apartment on Crescent Row was 12 minutes away through the service blocks. Narissa refused to be carried for the first 6. On the 7th, her injured leg folded again. I put her arm over my shoulder. Royal transportation costs extra. Narissa leaned enough weight onto me to make the point hurt. In my realm, men lost tongues for less. In my building, the landlord charges for blood on carpet. The word charges got her attention. By the time we reached my apartment, Corinne's blouse was torn and soaked. I gave Narissa my spare hoodie before Hank came home and turned one crisis into 12. Narissa held the hoodie at arm's length. This gray sack has no rank. Neither does my couch. They are a matched set. She put it on because the alternative was standing half-dressed in my kitchen. The sight should have felt impossible. It mostly felt expensive. Corinne's phone woke when Narissa's face passed over it. Messages covered the screen. Most came from people asking when their CEO would return. 3 came from the operations director blaming me for an unfinished overnight patch. Narissa scanned the title beside Corinne's name. This vessel rules Maddox Dynamics. Corinne runs it. Narissa lifted the phone. Then her authority is mine. I took my laptop off the table and placed the rent notice where she could see it. Maddox Dynamics does not pay this lease. Company authority ends at my door. Narissa's gaze moved from the notice to me. You refuse your ruler while standing in debt. Debt charges interest. Servitude charges weekends. That one reached her. She had watched my screen fill with the operations director's demands. I pushed the rent notice across the table. Half. Narissa read the number, then looked at the couch. You expect the Ember Empress to sleep there? I expect the woman living in my boss's body to stop giving unpaid orders under my roof. Narissa gripped the couch arm. Wood cracked under her fingers. I looked at the damage. That raised your half. The front door opened. Hank Dorsey, my roommate and the worst possible witness, stepped inside with a delivery bag and a grin already forming. His eyes moved from Corinne in my hoodie to the blood, then to the rent notice between us. Hank slowly closed the door. Tell me this is forbidden office gossip and not a felony. It is a housing dispute, I told him. Narissa faced Hank. This peasant lives here too? Hank pointed at himself. Peasant pays utilities, peasant gets context. Narissa extended 2 fingers toward the floor. Kneel, and I may overlook your tone. Hank set his delivery bag down, opened our rent-splitting app, and held the screen toward her. New roommates pay a third. Narissa looked ready to erase his bloodline. I stepped into her line. Unpaid orders stop here. Hank stays alive. Break only what we can afford. Hank glanced at the couch arm. Rule 3 arrived late. I gave him the useful version. Corinne had crashed. Narissa claimed to be an empress. Gold had appeared. Her first response to rescue had been attempted throat removal. Hank looked at the broken couch arm. Honestly, that last part sounds like your boss. Narissa took 1 step toward him. I moved between them. Hank stays intact. House Rule 2. Narissa's gaze returned to the door. I reject this kennel and its rules. She walked out. I let her. Hank stared at me. You let the concussed CEO leave? She bends car doors. I am respecting her recovery plan. A gold timer opened across my vision. Tether breach. Range, 50 feet. Body lock, 45 minutes. Hard failure, 90 minutes. A second line flashed beneath it. Forced separation will consume 1 barrier mark. The system finally gave me an explanation. It chose the worst possible moment, which was becoming a habit. I ran after her. Narissa had already reached the stairwell. She refused to turn around when I showed her the timer. Narissa gripped the rail. Your illusion cannot bind me. Great! Stand there and win. She did. I stayed on my side of the 50-foot line. Hank stood behind me with my dead phone plugged into his power bank. 10 minutes later, the building buzzer sounded. A family driver waited in the lobby beside a black sedan. He looked at Corinne's blood, then at the exact gap between us. The driver held out one hand. Ms. Maddox, your family sent me. Mr. Holloway stays here. His sedan idled with the rear door open exactly 49 feet from where I stood. I checked the gold line, then the parking stripe. You measured the curb. The driver kept his face empty. That answered enough. Hank came down behind me with the rent-splitting app open. Family pickup requires a damage deposit and 1/3 utilities. The driver ignored him. Hank looked at me. I tried diplomacy. Record the failure. Narissa gripped the stair rail. Tell this family I reject its carriage. I showed her the timer again. You can reject him after you step inside the line. Narissa saw the driver watching and lifted Corinne's chin. Royal pride had found an audience. Bad timing for everyone. At 20 minutes, the fingers on Corinne's left hand stiffened. The driver did not ask about her injury. He checked the distance on his phone. I moved closer. Narissa ordered me back. At 35 minutes, her steps shortened. She kept walking because rulers apparently treated organ failure as a debate technique. At 44 minutes, the driver reached for her elbow. Ms. Maddox, the car! Now! He pulled toward the open door, one measured step beyond the safe line. I caught his sleeve. You are testing the distance. The driver tore free and reached for her again. Nerissa slapped his hand away. I said leave. The timer hit 0 while she was still giving the order. Corinne's body locked from the shoulder down. Nerissa stayed upright through pure spite, then tipped toward the concrete. The driver lunged for her. I crossed the line and caught her first. One gold mark flared around my wrist and burned black. Nerissa's arm unlocked against my chest. Her breath returned in a ragged pull. 30 marks remained. The driver stared at the black gap, then at the 50-foot line reflected in my eyes. His phone flashed one black chevron icon. Range confirmed. He sent it before I could reach him. Hank lunged for the phone. The driver shoved him into the lobby wall. I shifted Corinne's weight onto one arm and caught the driver's coat with the other. Nerissa was still half locked against my chest. Gold returned to one hand anyway. Touch the utility peasant again, Nerissa warned, and your carriage leaves without a driver. The driver looked at her working fingers, then at the black gap on my wrist. The test had given him data. It had also put him inside reach of both problems. He backed toward the sedan. The family will send someone better prepared. Send someone who understands rent, I told him. He left without Corinne. The body had failed exactly when the system promised. Another 45 minutes risked permanent displacement. Nerissa looked from the timer to the blackened mark. Fury stayed in her gold eyes, but she stopped calling it an illusion. I carried her back upstairs. Hank opened the door and pointed at the couch. Royal Recovery Suite. Try not to destroy the deposit. Nerissa could have broken his neck. She sat on the couch under my rules. It lasted 7 seconds. Nerissa pressed 2 fingers against my chest. You will remain within 50 feet until I repair this vessel. I removed her hand. Requests start with please. Rent still exists. Nerissa's eyes sharpened. You bargain with my life. Your life became connected to mine. That gives both of us rules. She looked at the black gap where the first mark had burned away. Then Nerissa leaned back against the damaged couch and folded Corinne's arms. I will tolerate the furniture until dawn. Excellent. The couch accepts your surrender. Hank choked on a laugh and vanished into his room before royalty remembered violence. I had saved her life. I still did not owe her mine. Something tapped the kitchen window. Once. Twice. A black glass blade rested against the pane from the fire escape. A man's voice came through the thin glass. Tate Holloway, step away from the package. The black glass blade came through my kitchen window before I could answer the man who knew my name. I pulled Nerissa off the couch. Gold opened around us. The blade hit the barrier, reversed, and punched through the steel fire door across the hall. The ring around my wrist lost 1 mark. I had 30 at the start. The first second proved they could vanish fast. The man on the fire escape stared at the blade buried behind him. His face had carried professional boredom. That expression was cooked. Nerissa landed barefoot beside me. Corinne's body was injured, half-rested, and wearing my gray hoodie. The man still backed away from her. That reaction told me the team expected danger from Corinne's body. The apartment door slammed inward. 2 more men entered behind a broken lock. Both wore plain black coats. A black chevron insignia showed inside the lead man's cuff before he covered it. 3 enhanced killers had entered a 2-bedroom apartment. Their problem was the hallway. I kicked the coffee table onto its side and narrowed the path. Hank, bedroom, lock it! Hank moved toward his door. The lead attacker smiled at me. You are the disposable one. Step aside and keep breathing. I looked at the blade sticking through steel. Your opener needs work. He lunged, and I gave him the narrow lane before stepping off it. His shoulder hit the table edge. Nerissa caught his wrist and drove his hand into the wall hard enough to crack plaster. The second attacker came over the table instead of around it. He had speed. I had 6 feet of cheap furniture and a landlord who already hated me. I yanked the standing lamp into his legs. He cleared it anyway. A short black glass knife flashed toward my ribs. The barrier hit first. Gold snapped through the hallway and threw him into our coat rack. Another mark went dark. The lead attacker saw the gap and tapped 2 fingers against his own wrist. Alternating strikes. Burn the ring before recovery. So they knew the marks were finite too. Their attack had a question built into it. How many hits could I afford before one finally reached flesh? I shoved the broken table deeper into the hall. Every inch of cheap wood forced them to attack from the same direction. If they wanted my count, they would have to line up for it. Nerissa glanced at my wrist. Your protection is finite. Great observation. Break fewer walls. The fire escape attacker kicked through the remaining window and landed behind us. He grabbed Nerissa's hoodie and pulled her toward the kitchen opening. His blade rested against Corinne's spine. The lead attacker recovered and watched the gap between us instead of Nerissa. Their tactic was separation. I backed toward the hall. The lead attacker followed. The man behind Nerissa dragged her the other direction. A gold range line opened across my vision. 40 feet! 45! The lead attacker saw the light reflect in my eyes. His smile returned. 50 feet, he told his partner. Start the clock. The rule had come from whoever briefed them. I stopped retreating. The second attacker seized my arm. I turned with him, drove him into the sprinkler pipe, and hit the red glass bulb with his elbow. Water exploded across the hallway as the lights flickered. The attackers lost sight of the gold range line. It stayed clear in my vision. Nerissa twisted under the knife. Her injured body moved with clean, vicious timing. She stamped the man's knee sideways and drove the back of her skull into his face. He held on until the black glass touched her spine. Corinne's body jerked. Gold peeled away from Nerissa's shoulders like the weapon was trying to pull her out through the skin. A third mark burned. The attacker watched for the seizure. He had come to test the tether, and the test had just cost me another chance. I crossed the wet floor and caught his knife wrist. He had reached for an exhausted office worker. 11 months of restraint around management had left me ready to bend something. I bent his thumb until the knife dropped. Nerissa turned inside his grip, hooked his ankle, and put him face first onto the kitchen tile. Then Hank came back. My roommate had ignored the locked bedroom instruction and returned holding his desk chair over his head. Hank threw it at the lead attacker. The chair missed his skull. It hit his knees and broke his stance before his blade reached me. That saved 1 mark. Then Hank stepped into the open and ruined the savings. The second attacker ripped free from the coat rack and threw the black glass knife at him. I moved between them. Gold took the hit across my shoulder. The fourth mark burned. The lead attacker smiled through a split lip. 26! We can keep counting! You brought 3 men, I told him. Your math has a personnel problem. Hank went pale as the knife fell harmlessly at his feet. He looked at the 4 black gaps around my wrist and finally stopped treating the night like a bad game stream. Tate, Hank breathed, those are running out. Bedroom, this time mean it. Hank backed away. The lead attacker reached for him again. Nerissa picked up a bottle of cherry cola from the counter and smashed the base against his knuckles. He released Hank with a shout. Nerissa twisted the cap open with her teeth, took 1 furious swallow, and paused. The killer was still on 1 knee. Nerissa looked at the bottle instead. This potion bites, Nerissa declared. It costs $2, Hank told her from the bedroom doorway. Nerissa drove her heel into the attacker's chest without looking away from the label. Acquire more! The lead attacker flew backward into the damaged couch. Royalty had discovered cherry cola during a home invasion. My security deposit was now part of history. The man from the fire escape crawled for his dropped knife. I kicked it under the refrigerator. The second attacker charged through the sprinkler water. I saw his feet load before his shoulders moved. I ducked, trapped his arm, and sent him across the overturned table. Nerissa stepped on his wrist. May I kill this one? I answered. No. Nerissa increased the pressure until he screamed. Your mercy is inefficient. Dead men answer poorly. The lead attacker tried to rise from the couch. I grabbed the broken chair leg and pointed it at his throat. Who sent you? He looked at Nerissa, then at my gold marks. His confidence was finished. Palisade recovery, the lead attacker muttered. Bring the woman back. Heat the witness 50 feet away. He called it a recovery, which told me Corinne was the package. It did not tell me who signed the order. The black chevron insignia inside his cuff matched the shape on the shattered blade handle. The shared symbol and phrase made the crash look organized. Nerissa pressed her heel harder. Palisade belongs to whom? The lead attacker clenched his jaw. I held up the cherry cola bottle. Answer before she finishes the potion. She seems stronger already. Hank made a choking noise from the doorway. His eyes jumped to the bottle. Half a second was plenty. Dispatch gives us the route, he snapped. The client stays hidden. His partner used that moment to shove the table into Nerissa. She stepped over it and struck him once below the ribs. He folded around her fist and stayed there. The lead attacker bolted for the broken door. A new line cut across my vision. Consequential defiance recorded. Reward, forge breath. Heat pulled into my lungs. A second line followed. Reward, surge step. The lead attacker reached the stairwell. I took 1 full breath and pushed. 1 violent burst carried me down the hallway. I braced the steel door before he reached it. My right leg immediately started shaking. The attacker saw the distance I had crossed. His mouth opened. Nothing useful came out. I smiled through the leg tremor. Palisade should request a refund. He folded faster than the cheap table. Nerissa approached with the cherry cola still in hand. Her eyes moved from my shaking leg to the distance I had crossed. You learned a movement art during combat, Nerissa observed. The system has aggressive onboarding. Nerissa lifted Corinne's chin. You remain crude. You may become my disciple. That sounds unpaid. Her gold eyes narrowed. Good. The hierarchy had survived 7 seconds again. The man she had dropped tried to crawl toward the window. Nerissa caught the back of his coat. I stopped her free hand before it reached his neck. They leave alive. Nerissa faced me. They will return. Then they can explain the window bill to whoever sent them. Hank tore the blank payment stub from my overdue rent notice. He wrote window in thick letters and shoved it into the lead attacker's coat. Peasant accounting, Hank told him. Very feared in this realm. The 3 attackers limped out together. The lead man looked back once at Nerissa, once at my wrist, and chose speed. Hank started after them with the broken chair leg. I caught his shirt and pulled him back. They know where we live, Hank snapped. Now they also know we send people home, Hank answered by dragging the spare mattress against the ruined door and handing me his charged phone. I let the attackers carry the warning. Nerissa crouched beside the broken black glass knife. She snapped a small shard from the handle and slipped it into Corinne's hoodie pocket. I saw the motion. Keeping souvenirs? Nerissa touched the pocket. This substance attacks the bond between soul and vessel. I will study it. That was all she offered. I had learned to value short answers from dangerous people. The attack had burned 4 marks. 26 remained. Hank looked at the blood, water, broken furniture, and open window. Then he braced the broken front door with a dining chair. I am staying, Hank told me. You two attract murder, and neither of you understands the lease. He had come back for me. That made the 4th mark easy to spend. Nerissa held out the empty cherry cola bottle. More! Hank stared at the woman pinning enhanced killers 20 minutes earlier. Please is a house rule. Nerissa looked toward me. I waited until her jaw tightened. Acquire more, please, Nerissa forced out. Hank walked to the refrigerator like he had just defeated an empire. At 5:58 that morning, my phone finally charged enough to ring. The operations director, who had turned overtime into a hostage situation, filled the screen. He started shouting before I answered. A client service was down. He blamed my missing overnight patch. If it stayed down until 9, he would dock the emergency team's weekend pay and mark me absent. I looked at the 4 black gaps on my wrist. Send me the outage log, I told him. I will be there. The operations director laughed. You will be there alone. Corinne has family handling her recovery. The building buzzer sounded. The family driver from the tether test waited downstairs with the same black sedan. His instruction was simple. Corinne went with him. Tate Holloway stayed behind. Nerissa finished her 2nd cherry cola and crushed the bottle in one hand. We go your tower together, Nerissa decided. I picked up my wet laptop. For once, that was already my plan. Colton Halbrook had cameras aimed at us before we cleared the Maddox Tower lobby. He was the Halbrook Properties heir and Corinne's family-approved fiancé. He had brought a film crew to another person's crash recovery. Colton stood beside a silver breakfast cart with flowers, pastries, and a smile that had probably received professional lighting. Nerissa walked beside me in my gray hoodie, holding a bottle of cherry cola. That image cost him the first round before anyone spoke. Colton opened his arms toward Corinne's body. Corinne, thank God, we were told an employee removed you from the crash scene. Nerissa looked at the breakfast cart. Then she drank cheap cherry cola from a $2 bottle. Colton's smile tightened as a camera operator moved closer. The setup wrote its own script, Corinne safe, grateful, and standing far away from me. The 50-foot tether kept her beside me. The family driver from Crescent Row stepped between us. Mr. Holloway, your access ends here. Ms. Maddox comes upstairs alone. I showed him the 30-foot gap to the elevators. Then Corinne stays here. The driver reached for Nerissa's elbow. Nerissa's gold eyes brightened. I caught her wrist before she converted the lobby into a crime scene. No killing family employees before coffee, I told her. Colton watched my hand on Corinne's wrist before he checked her wound. He faced the nearest camera. This man appears confused about his position. My position is within 50 feet, I answered. Colton stepped closer. Your position is payroll. The elevator doors opened behind him, and Kurt Danner charged out with his tie loose and his phone raised. He was Maddox Dynamics' operations director, and the man who had turned my nights into company property. Kurt pointed at me for the cameras. There he is, the engineer who vanished while our largest client went dark. The receptionist turned toward Kurt. The camera operator did too. Kurt raised his voice for the cameras. I let him keep talking. The client service has been down for 71 minutes, Kurt announced. At 2 hours, the emergency team loses its weekend pay. Tate owned the patch. Tate disappeared. 80 people had worked that weekend. Kurt had tied their money to my public firing. Shame was the only management tool I had ever seen him use. Their weekends had been mine for 11 months. I held out my hand. Get me the outage log. Kurt laughed. You do not get to make demands. Then keep explaining to the cameras why you would rather talk than restore the client. The camera operator turned fully toward Kurt. The receptionist lowered her phone and listened. Good. Now his delay belonged to him. Colton used the pause to guide Nerissa toward the breakfast cart. His hand settled at the back of Corinne's hoodie for the camera. Nerissa caught his index finger and bent it until his smile twitched. Remove your hand, Nerissa warned. Colton pulled free and looked at me instead. You have filled her head while she is vulnerable. I pointed at the outage clock. Your recovery video has 49 minutes before 80 people lose money. Pick a useful subject. Colton turned the camera toward my face. Perfect. We can film the employee responsible. Keep filming, I told him. Colton nodded toward the camera. Get this, he told the operator and kept talking. Kurt shoved the tablet against my chest. You have 49 minutes. After that, security walks you out. I opened the log. One bad rollback had removed the patch I wrote 2 weeks earlier. The disabled line sat in plain view. Kurt had already staged an office execution around a mistake one careful glance could fix. I headed toward the engineering bullpen. The family driver blocked Narissa. Ms. Maddox goes to the executive floor. Narissa placed one finger against his chest. Move! He moved. Colton followed with his cameras and breakfast cart. His polished recovery shot now showed my boss walking behind me. The expensive pastries rolled after us. He had already lost the shot. He kept filming anyway. The bullpen had 80 tired faces and one red outage clock on the wall. 46 minutes remained. Several engineers looked at me like I had personally reached into their wallets. Kurt had spent 71 minutes giving them my name. I sat at my old desk and opened the service console. Kurt stood behind me. Everyone should understand that Tate ignored direct orders last night. I kept typing. I was pulling your CEO out of a wreck. Kurt scoffed. Convenient. Narissa turned from the outage clock. He saved this body while you sent him overtime demands. Every nearby keyboard slowed. Kurt looked at Corinne's face and tried the tone he used on junior staff. Corinne, you are injured. Colton will take you home. Narissa picked up Kurt's printed overnight schedule from my desk. It showed names stacked across 12-hour blocks. You force 80 people to surrender rest because your system failed, Narissa observed. Kurt reached for the page. That schedule is necessary. Narissa tore it in half. You built slavery into a schedule. The payroll analyst folded her arms. 2 engineers stopped typing and looked at Kurt. I restored the removed patch and started the service checks. 1 status line stayed red. Kurt leaned over my shoulder. There, he failed again. Colton brought the camera close enough to catch the screen. Say that clearly, Kurt. Kurt smiled for the lens. Tate Holloway cost 80 employees their weekend pay. The payroll analyst looked at the clock. 38 minutes remained, but Kurt had already declared the loss. The rollback history showed the second half of my old patch disabled. I restored it with 1 click. Kurt had announced failure before anyone reached that line. 9 minutes had passed when the outage clock went green. The client service returned before Kurt found another speech. A cheer started near the back, but the payroll analyst beside the wall screen did something more useful. She refreshed the weekend pay total and raised both hands. All 80 payments cleared, the payroll analyst called. Then she faced me. Tate, make the schedule change permanent. 3 engineers stepped away from Kurt and came to my desk. Another rolled my old emergency pager across the floor toward him. Kurt looked down as the pager rested against his shoe. The workers waited for him to pick it up. Their weekend had been my weekend once. This time, nobody took it. Colton pushed through the engineers. His camera still recorded. A routine repair does not excuse kidnapping, Colton declared. Corinne, tell everyone where you spent the night. The denial trap was obvious. If Corinne rejected me on camera, her public status would crush mine. Narissa walked to my desk, set the cherry cola beside my keyboard, and faced his camera. I live with him, Narissa stated. The camera operator's lens dipped. Colton's breakfast cart stopped rolling. Kurt forgot the pager at his feet. A red light stayed on beside the camera. The recovery feed was live across the company channel. Colton reached for the controls. The camera operator pulled them away. Thousands are already watching! The payroll analyst lifted her phone. The clip had reached the employee chat before Colton found the power switch. Narissa had chosen the most explosive answer available. Ancient rulers treated damage control as surrender. Colton recovered first. Bad habit. He pointed at my hoodie around Corinne's body. You put her in your clothes and moved her into your apartment. You were exploiting a wounded woman. I finished closing the service window. Keep the camera running. Your family may ask who made this public. Colton's jaw tightened. You think 1 patch makes you important? No. 80 paid workers do. The payroll analyst stepped beside me. He saved our weekend pay while you filmed breakfast. Her choice moved 3 more engineers behind my desk. Colton looked at the workers around my desk and tried another route. Corinne, your family approved our engagement. Come upstairs and clear this up. Narissa reached for the temporary recovery desk staged beside the glass executive office. It was heavy enough that 2 assistants had used a cart to position it. She dragged it across the floor alone. The cameras followed. Narissa stopped the desk beside mine, dropped into the chair and opened another cherry cola. Then Narissa pointed at Colton's silver breakfast cart. Feed the workers, he interrupted. The payroll analyst took the handle before Colton could object. Engineers cleared the pastries in seconds. One handed the untouched flowers to the receptionist. Colton had arrived with luxury breakfast and a recovery feed. Now his own camera showed the night team eating around my desk. My desk remains here, Narissa announced. Tate remains here. Kurt takes the emergency seat he assigned to others. Kurt stared at my old overnight workstation near the server wall. Corinne, that is absurd. Nerissa looked at the red emergency pager by his shoe. Then refuse in front of the 80 people whose pay you wagered. Kurt looked around, and nobody moved to help him. He picked up the pager and sat at the emergency desk. The operations director who had timed my breaks now waited for the alarm that used to own my nights. I allowed myself one petty second. Try not to miss dinner, I told him. The bullpen laughed. Kurt folded into the chair and nobody moved to rescue him. Colton stepped close enough for only me to hear. You are enjoying borrowed authority. I looked at Nerissa using Corinne's desk beside mine. You brought the cameras. Colton smiled again. It looked rehearsed. I took that as a warning, not a confession. The elevator opened once more. The family driver returned and handed Nerissa a ringing phone. Gareth Maddox filled the screen. Gareth was Corinne's older half-brother and chair of the Maddox family office. His voice came through speaker mode, calm enough to sound expensive. Corinne, leave Tate Holloway and come to Maddox Ridge, Gareth ordered. You have until Friday night to accept Colton's engagement. Nerissa leaned back in the chair she had moved beside me. I accept commands from neither brother nor rejected suitor. Colton's face went hard at rejected. Gareth continued without raising his voice. Then check your accounts. The family will not finance this performance. Nerissa opened Corinne's account screen. Every balance showed frozen access. The family had failed to pull her away with a driver. So they turned money into a leash and put Colton at the other end. Nerissa looked at the frozen screen, then at my overdue rent notice sticking from my laptop bag. How much wealth remains to this vessel? Nerissa asked. Apparently less than half the rent. Her stare promised violence. The account stayed frozen. Gareth ended the call with one final instruction. Friday night, Maddox Ridge. Bring Tate if he is foolish enough to attend. The line went dead. I thought the office rumor was the expensive part. 3 nights later, the Maddox family put a price on Corinne's obedience and expected me to carry her to the table. By Thursday morning, Corinne's accounts were still frozen. Friday night's family demand was still active. Hank had priced our apartment damage at 1 full month of rent. He laid the invoice across our scorched kitchen table. The broken couch led the list. The window, front door, sprinkler cleanup, and dining chair followed. Hank tapped the total. Royalty has expensive hobbies. Nerissa sat on the damaged couch in my gray hoodie, drinking the last cherry cola. Money mattered. Power mattered more. The universe still paid only after someone tried to ruin my life. So I tried the cheap route first. I took the bottle from Nerissa's hand and set it beside Hank's invoice. No more cola until you pay rent. Nerissa's gold eyes sharpened. Return it before I remove your hand. I waited for the defiance system. A line opened across my vision. Staged defiance detected. No reward. Consequence required. The line vanished. Hank read my face. The magic reward rejected you? I told Hank. Apparently it has standards. Nerissa reclaims the bottle. Even your hidden power recognizes cheap insolence. She finished the cola while looking far too pleased with herself. The failed trick answered one question. Cheap surprise was finished. The next reward needed a consequence. I could not fake. Friday night already had plenty of candidates. Nerissa placed Corinne's phone beside the invoice. Garrett's last message remained on screen. Appear at Maddox Ridge, accept Colton before dinner ended, or lose access to everything Corinne owned. Then Nerissa tore a blank page from Hank's delivery pad. She drew 3 short lines and 1 circle. Forge breath should take an ordinary student 3 weeks, Nerissa declared. You will learn enough before Friday to survive 1 serious opponent. I took the page. How many attempts? Nerissa tapped the circle. 3 full cycles today. A 4th may stop this weak heart. Hank looked from the page to me. The same heart that pays rent? I answered Hank currently. Nerissa pointed at the floor. Sit. I sat because the family had already used money and public shame. The next step looked physical. The method fit inside 30 words. Pull heat on the inhale, hold it below the ribs, drive it through the limbs on the exhale. Nerissa waited for questions. I started. The first breath scraped heat down my throat. The second pulled warmth through the apartment. Steam lifted from the wet window frame. The screws in Hank's table turned red. Nerissa moved 1 step closer. Her teacher's smirk disappeared. The third breath hit like a live wire under my ribs. Heat rushed through my arms, legs, and spine. The table blackened beneath my palms. 1 leg split with a hard crack. Then every straight edge in the room gained a thin, bright seam. The couch arm showed 3 weak points. The window frame showed 6. A pale line ran through the damaged table legs seconds before it folded. I saw all of it. Then my heart stopped cooperating. The room tilted. My chest locked. I tried to breathe and got nothing. A barrier mark flared around my wrist and burned black. 25 remained. Nerissa caught me before my head hit the floor. She drove 2 fingers under my ribs and struck my chest with her palm. Air tore back into my lungs. Nerissa held me upright by the shirt. 3 cycles means 3. Greedy insects still require hearts. Her palm stayed against my chest until the rhythm stopped skipping. Then Nerissa shoved me upright like concern had been a clerical error. I managed. You gave me a deadline. Nerissa tightened her grip on my shirt. I gave you 3 weeks. You used 3 breaths. Nerissa's expression shifted. Her teacher's confidence turned cautious. The defiance system returned. Consequential defiance recorded. Reward, fault site. A second line followed. Threshold increased. Future rewards require public hierarchy reversal. The bright seams sharpened. I looked at the remaining table leg. A split ran through its center. Move your invoice, I told Hank. Hank snatched the paper away. The leg broke 1 second later. The tabletop dropped, and Nerissa caught it with one hand before it crushed my knees. Hank stared at the broken wood. Then he added another line to the invoice. Table, Hank announced. Premium emergency pricing. Fault site lasted about 20 seconds before a spike drove through my forehead. I shut it down and pressed my fingers against my eyes. A dry crack sounded above Hank. The wall cabinet had soaked through during the sprinkler flood. One hinge ripped free, and the cabinet tipped toward him. The bright fault line flashed back into view before I consciously opened the skill. I pulled 1 forge breath and used surge step. The burst carried me across the kitchen. I caught Hank by the shirt and dragged him clear as the cabinet smashed through his chair. My right leg started shaking again. Hank looked at the ruined chair, then at the spot where his head had been. He added cabinet to the invoice. You saved me, Hank admitted. You also destroyed my chair during the save. Accounting remains complicated. Fault site had shown me the falling cabinet before it moved. The headache and leg tremor made sure I could not stare forever or sprint without cost. Nerissa lowered the tabletop. Your sight consumes focus. Waste it and you will miss the strike that matters, I told Nerissa. Useful advice from the woman who broke the couch. Nerissa looked at Hank's invoice. The couch insulted me first. Hank nodded slowly. I will tell the landlord. Someone knocked against the broken doorframe before Hank could assign blame. A repair worker stood in the hall with a temporary lock and a payment screen. He looked at the wrecked kitchen, then at me. Billing account names, Tate Holloway liable, the repair worker announced. No deposit, no secure door. The attackers had brought the blades. The family had sent the driver. My name still received the bill. Nerissa took Corinne's phone from the couch. 1 emergency property line still answered to the CEO stripe. Corinne's thumb entered a code Nerissa had never learned. Nerissa stared at the hand for half a beat, then faced Hank. State the repair amount. Hank checked the invoice. $4,860, plus 39 if royalty plans to insult the family in clean fabric. I looked at Nerissa. Only that amount, nothing else. Nerissa tapped the executive access. Put it under Tate's control. My phone woke with a transfer. $4,899 available. The repair worker's contempt disappeared before the screen dimmed. I paid the $4,860 deposit in front of him. The temporary lock went onto our door. $39 remained. Hank held up his phone. The money landed. Our door has achieved class mobility. Corinne's phone rang immediately. Garrett's voice came through speaker mode. Corinne, you moved family-controlled funds to Tate Holloway. Nerissa rested one hand on my shoulder until my legs steadied. I paid damage caused while your people hunted this body. Be grateful I used money. Garrett's tone hardened. The remaining executive access is frozen now. Colton expects a formal answer. Friday. Dress accordingly. Every other line on Corinne's screen turned red while the repair worker watched. Gareth had tried to stop a wealth transfer. He arrived 1 door late. The training had cost 1 barrier mark and another piece of furniture. It had also put real money in my hand long enough to fix the entrance. Hank looked at the $39 left on my phone. Can formal clothes survive cardiac arrest and eviction? I stood carefully. They only need to annoy Gareth. By noon, the first downtown boutique had already received the family version of our story. The manager looked at Corinne's bruises, my cheap jacket, and the gray hoodie. Her mouth tightened before we reached the counter. The manager lifted a white coat from a display. Ms. Maddox, this is $6,000. Your family usually approves the private collection. I checked the tag and put it back. She needs a hoodie. The manager looked me over. You are choosing for her? Nerissa touched the fabric of the white coat. Her hand paused. For half a second, Corinne's fingers folded the cuff with practiced precision. Nerissa stared at the movement like the body had answered without permission. Then Nerissa dropped the coat. This vessel remembers useless habits. The manager heard only the word vessel. Her concern turned dramatic. The manager stepped between me and Corinne's body. Sir, I need you to give Ms. Maddox space. I pointed at the nearest wall. She locks up beyond 50 feet. Space has limits. The manager tapped her phone beneath the counter. The Maddox family office warned us that someone might be controlling her finances. There it was. Colton's public accusation had reached the cash register before we did. Nerissa opened Corinne's payment screen. The emergency line that had repaired our door now showed frozen in red. The red decline heartened the manager's suspicion. You need to step away from her accounts. Nerissa removed the Maddox executive keycard from Corinne's damaged wallet and placed it in my hand. The metal card still carried the CEO stripe. Nerissa faced the manager. Ask Tate, he controls what remains. I closed my fingers around the keycard. The card answers to me, her choices stay hers. Nerissa glanced at me, then used the distinction, well. The manager heard the boundary and the order. Her tone changed so fast it deserved a system reward. Mr. Holloway, the manager corrected, would you like us to hold the coat? I answered the manager, no. I found a plain black hoodie on the clearance wall. $39. Nerissa held it against Corinne's body. The family will hate this. I tapped the price tag. That is the first useful feature. I paid with the $39 Gareth had failed to stop. Nothing remained in the clothing budget. My phone buzzed with a photo from Hank. The scorched table filled the screen beside the invoice. The manager folded the hoodie with both hands and passed the bag to me. Her eyes kept returning to the executive keycard. 5 minutes earlier, she had treated me like a handler. Now she waited for my approval before speaking to the CEO. The system stayed silent. Good. Friday's family table still waited. Before the manager finished wrapping the hoodie, the boutique doors opened. The family driver from Maddox Tower entered with 2 security employees behind him. That alert had delivered family pressure instead of ordinary help. The driver held out his hand toward Corinne's body. Ms. Maddox, Mr. Gareth wants you at Maddox Ridge now. Mr. Holloway is to surrender the keycard. Nerissa stepped behind me by 1 pace. The move kept the tether safe and made the driver address the person he had dismissed Wednesday. I held the executive keycard between 2 fingers. Friday night was Garrett's deadline. He can wait. The driver reached for the card. Nerissa caught his wrist. Tate controls my access until I decide otherwise. Touch him again and you will shop for a new hand. Both security employees looked at the bent display rack near Nerissa and stopped moving. The manager backed away from her phone. Everyone she had summoned had watched Corinne put authority in my hand. The driver lowered his arm. Gareth will treat this as proof that Tate is controlling you. Nerissa released him. Then Gareth may arrive Friday and embarrass himself in person. The driver left without the keycard or Corinne. The manager carried our $39 bag to the door herself. Outside the boutique, Nerissa changed into the black hoodie. She moved the black glass shard from the gray pocket into the new one before handing my old hoodie back. Nerissa pinched the new fabric. This garment cost $39. You spent rent money while holding access to this vessel's shares. I folded the receipt into my pocket. The keycard opens doors. It buys 0 obedience and frozen shares buys 0 hoodies. Nerissa studied me for 1 long second. Good, keep speaking that clearly when the family offers you more. I told Nerissa, try to destroy the hoodie in a socially useful way. Corinne's phone buzzed twice. Garrett's message was first. Friday's dinner would decide whether Corinne kept access to Maddox Dynamics or accepted Colton's engagement. Colton's message carried a calendar block for Friday at 1. Mandatory client demonstration. Approver, Tate Holloway. I had never seen the shipment attached to my name. Kurt had put me on stage. Colton had made sure the client would be watching. Friday had become a 2-part execution. Too bad for them, I had just learned to see where things broke. Kurt Danner opened Friday's client demonstration by calling me a thief. 20 minutes remained before the client walked. If the unit failed, 80 workers lost an average bonus of $2,400. Kurt had attached my name to the shipment and invited half the engineering floor to watch me get fired. He stood beside a row of black demo units with Colton and the client lead. The units wore premium paint and polished labels. Nobody had tested them in front of us yet. Nerissa stood beside me in the $39 hoodie. The Maddox executive keycard rested in my pocket. Kurt pointed at it. Tate took control of Corinne's access, approved an untested shipment, and endangered the client launch. Several workers looked at me. They had trusted me with 1 weekend. Kurt was offering them a reason to take it back. The payroll analyst refreshed the bonus screen. Every name showed pending. An overnight engineer near the front crossed his arms. My bonus covers 2 months of childcare. Tell us whether your name belongs on that shipment. He had earned the question. Kurt had placed their money under my signature. I faced the workers. Keep watching. The person who insists on running this unit will answer you. Kurt smiled at my answer. Good. He would keep pushing. Colton moved the client lead closer. We should demonstrate the exact unit Tate approved. Then everyone can watch accountability happen. He had just made the firing public. I let him build the stage. The client lead looked at me. Did you approve this shipment? I shook my head. I had never seen it before yesterday. Kurt held out his palm. Then put your employee badge on the table. If the unit fails, you leave before the client does. I unclipped the badge and set it beside the start control. If it passes, yours replaces it. The workers leaned closer. Kurt had wanted a firing. I gave him matching stakes. Colton answered for him. Agreed. Kurt's smile twitched, but the room had already heard the deal. Kurt slapped a tablet onto the demo table. Your name is on the line? Then run the unit, I told him. Kurt's smile widened. You heard him? A side door opened. Hank entered carrying lunch, 4 cherry colas, and the apartment damage invoice in a clear folder. He saw the room, saw Kurt shouting, and tried to mute the demo console before setting down the drinks. Hank hit the broadcast icon instead. Kurt's accusation jumped onto the employee channel. Phones started vibrating across the floor. Colton stabbed the end button. Hank had already sent the live link through the channel, so every phone kept playing. Colton had lost control of his own audience. The client demonstration now had every worker in the building as an audience. Hank looked at the glowing icon. That button design is hostile. Leave it, I told Hank. Kurt lunged for the console. Nerissa dropped into his presentation chair and caught the armrest. The plastic snapped under Corinne's fingers. Laughter broke near the back. Kurt stopped with one hand still extended. Nerissa examined the broken armrest. Your authority is built like your furniture. Kurt turned red. Corinne, this is a serious client matter. Nerissa picked up the nearest demo casing with 2 fingers. The label called it military grade. She bent it inward. The casing folded with a soft metal groan. The client lead stepped closer. Workers raised phones. Colton's face tightened. Colton took the bent shell from Nerissa. She damaged 1 sample. The remaining units meet specification. I opened fault site. Bright fracture lines cut across every black casing on the table. Every casing except one. One clean unit sat at the far end beneath a calibration cable. I carried it to the client table while Colton argued with Nerissa. The fault lines spread through the counterfeit braces, cheap thermal plates, and weak fasteners. I needed only one conclusion. The units would split under load. Pressure drove behind my eyes. I closed fault site before the 20-second limit turned the room white. Colton placed an untouched black unit on the main stand. We will run this one. I looked at him. Use whichever unit you trust most. Colton chose the shiniest casing. Of course he did. The client lead moved closer at Colton's invitation. Kurt called the workers forward too. They packed the audience around the stand until my badge sat at the center of it. Colton pressed the start control himself. The unit climbed through the first load step. Kurt announced, stable. The second step began. A fracture snapped across the casing. Colton kept his hand on the control. Continue. The client lead pointed at the housing. The casing is opening. Colton raised the load anyway. The casing split down the center. Smoke rolled into his face. The display died. A cooling fan dropped onto the table and spun in a slow circle beside his cuff. The bonus screen reacted before Kurt did. 80 pending names turned red. The overnight engineer near me closed his eyes once, then looked straight at my badge on the table. Colton stood there with soot across his expensive shirt. He had cooked his own demonstration in front of the client, the workers, and the employee channel. A clown rarely gets that much production value. Kurt recovered first. Bad management habit. Kurt pointed at me. Tate tampered with it. The workers looked at the unit Colton had selected and started laughing. I lifted the genuine unit. Then let me tamper with this one. Colton stepped between us. He switched units. That proves he staged the failure. The client lead pointed at the dead casing beside Colton's soot-stained cuff. You chose that unit and ran it after I told you the housing was opening. Colton looked at Kurt for support. Kurt looked at the exit. The client lead gave me 1 minute before she walked. Fail again and the contract ends here. Kurt snatched my employee badge from beside the control. The first unit failed. The deal is finished. I put one hand on the genuine casing. The unit with my hands on it has not run yet. Keep the badge warm. The workers closed around the table before Kurt could remove me. I removed the failed casing, seated the genuine unit, and restarted the same sequence. The wall display climbed from red to green while Colton stood close enough to feel every second. 42 seconds later, the live system held. The client lead turned from Colton and faced me. Tate, you handle the launch unit from here. The bonus board on the wall refreshed. 80 names changed from red to green. The payroll analyst raised her phone so the room could see the total. All bonuses protected. Average payment, $2,400. Kurt lunged for the genuine unit. He grabbed the live power cable and ripped the machine halfway off the stand. The calibration plate tipped toward the payroll analyst. Fault site flashed one bright seam through the stand. I kicked the weak brace, let the frame collapse away from her, and caught the genuine unit against my injured forearm. The plate hit the floor instead of her ankle. My arm went numb again. The green load display never dropped. The overnight engineer caught Kurt's wrist before he reached the start control. My bonus covers my child's care, the engineer told him. You do not get a second attempt. Kurt swung with his free hand. The engineer took the hit and held on. 2 more workers lifted the genuine unit from my arms. The client lead took the far handle herself. My launch unit stays with the people who kept it alive, the client lead told Kurt. They moved it behind my table while the bonus board stayed green. Colton stepped away from Kurt so quickly the soot on his shirt almost looked dignified. Kurt stared at him. You gave me Tate's approval code. Colton opened a private transfer screen and held it low between them. Walk out now. The family covers your severance. Kurt reached for the phone. Colton pulled it back when he noticed Hank's employee channel camera still pointed at them. That tiny retreat told Kurt exactly how disposable he had become. Colton raised both hands for the employee channel. You misunderstood an ordinary request. Nerissa lifted the split counterfeit casing beside Colton's face. Your ordinary request smoked in your hands. Kurt reached for my badge again. Nerissa caught his employee badge first and tore it from his shirt. The black paint on the failed casing flaked beneath her thumb. A black chevron insignia showed under the brace. It matched the men who had attacked Crescent Row. The apartment blades and the company trap had touched the same network. The person above it still had no name. Kurt saw me looking and tried to run. Colton pointed toward security. Clear the demo floor. Remove the damaged units. One security employee reached for the chevron casing. Nerissa lifted it with one hand and held the split edge beside Kurt's face. Choose carefully. This object has already embarrassed 2 men. The security employee looked at the client lead holding the genuine unit with the workers. He lowered his hand. Kurt tried the exit instead. The payroll analyst blocked him with the red emergency pager. The overnight engineer stayed on his other side. The client lead turned the cracked casing once and entered its serial number. The demo console showed one line. Operations override, Kurt Danner. The number locked in the loss after Kurt had already tried to destroy the result. Kurt looked at Colton again. Colton gave him more floor. I rerouted the genuine units, Kurt admitted. Colton wanted Tate attached to a clean failure before Friday night, Colton snapped. He is lying to save himself. Then Colton pointed at the overnight engineer. Confirm Kurt acted alone and I double your bonus. The engineer looked at the green payment beside his name. He moved the protected unit farther behind me instead. My bonus came from the machine Tate saved, the engineer told Colton. Keep your hush money. The payroll analyst moved the green bonus board with the unit. Workers followed the money and the machine. Kurt kept the empty side of the room. Nerissa pinned his badge to the split casing. She tapped the badge against the black chevron. Your title and your work finally match. Kurt had used our weekends as a leash. Now he stood beside the failed unit while nobody obeyed him. Across my vision, the defiance system opened. Public hierarchy reversal confirmed. Reward, command pulse. 1 hostile target. 3 heartbeats. Same target once per day. The prompt vanished. Kurt still had my badge clenched in one hand. The new power tightened behind my tongue, waiting for one short command. I held out my palm. The unit passed. Give it back. Kurt returned the badge because the worker stepped with me. Command pulse stayed unused. A public loss hit harder when nobody could blame magic. A command that could freeze 1 hostile person sounded useful. I left it unused. The last indoor power test had cost 1 table and a month of rent. Colton wiped soot from his shirt. Enjoy the performance, Tate! Tonight the family decides whether Corinne keeps the company you are using. I clipped my employee badge back on. Kurt stayed pinned to the failed casing beside the worker bonus board. I looked at Colton's soot-stained shirt. You should change shirts before proposing. Colton's jaw locked, his phone buzzed. Mine followed. The dinner security list had updated. 1 line sat above my mandatory attendance notice. Arlo Fitch, Palisade Field Chief. Palisade had failed at my apartment. Its chevron had just surfaced inside Maddox Hardware. Now its field chief was waiting at the family table. Office authority had failed. Friday night's guest list now carried Palisade muscle. The Maddox family offered Corinne a mansion, her company, and a fiancé. Colton added a camera and a standing line for the employee. Nerissa arrived at Maddox Ridge in my $39 hoodie carrying cherry cola. A staff member pointed behind the line. Mr. Holloway waits there until the family finishes. Colton faced his camera and lifted a check. This is Tate's employee release. Once he accepts, Corinne returns to family care. The amount could have covered 5 years of rent. He had turned a bribe into a public receipt for my removal. Nerissa kept walking. Serve this drink at the head of the table. Give Tate the family seat. The staff member looked toward Gareth Maddox, Corinne's older half-brother, and the Maddox family office chair. Gareth sat beside a black ring box. He gave no permission. The staff member looked at Nerissa's gold eyes and moved the chair anyway. Colton's camera followed me across the standing line and into the seat beside Corinne's body. Arlo Fitch stood behind Gareth. Arlo was Gareth's Palisade field chief, wearing 1 reinforced gauntlet and watching my barrier marks. At the far end sat Orson Kestrel, a retired enhanced fighter the guests treated like an expert. He watched hands and exits while everyone else watched the cheap hoodie. A family guest laughed at Nerissa's bottle. "Corinne, that is a peasant drink." Nerissa poured the vintage wine from her glass into a plant. "Then the peasant drink has defeated it." The staff brought cherry cola to every place setting. I took Colton's release check, folded it once, and dropped it into his untouched wine. Ink bled across the amount. "My time is not for sale twice," I told his camera. The staff member set my bottle beside the soaked check. Colton had staged an employee release. His own wine now held the evidence. Colton reached to stop his camera. The staff member who had moved my chair lifted the camera stand out of his reach. "Mr. Halbrook told us the release was public." A family uncle grabbed the back of my chair. "Employees still do not sit at the head table." Nerissa planted one sneaker on the chair leg. The uncle pulled. The chair stayed. Nerissa drank her cherry cola without looking at him. "Tate sits. You may continue losing with dignity or without it." The uncle released the chair. The staff member placed the first dinner plate in front of me instead of Colton. His public release had become my family seat before the main course. Gareth waited until the first guest opened the cheap drink. The guest who had called it peasant took a cautious sip. Nerissa watched him swallow. "The drink accepts your surrender," Nerissa told him. The staff member hid a smile. "Accept Colton before dessert," Gareth told Corinne's body. "Keep Maddox Ridge, your accounts and the CEO suite, refuse, and every family-controlled resource ends tonight." Nerissa drank from the bottle. "Your threat did not improve when you seated it at a larger table." Colton opened the ring box. "Corinne, Tate is using your condition. Accept the engagement and let the family protect you." Nerissa looked at the ring. "You failed to protect one demo unit from yourself." Several guests lowered their eyes. Colton held the ring toward Corinne's hand. "This ends tonight." Nerissa closed the box with one finger. "Correct." Colton grabbed Corinne's wrist. I used one surge step. The burst carried me around the table before his grip tightened. My right leg trembled when I stopped, but my hand closed over his wrist. "Release her," I told him. Colton looked at Gareth instead of me. "You see, he thinks he owns access to her body." Nerissa tore free and crushed the ring box in Corinne's hand. Metal cracked. The black ring bent inside the velvet. Nerissa dropped the wreckage into Colton's wineglass, on top of the soaked employee release check. "Your claim has the same strength as your hardware." Colton's face emptied. The crushed ring and ruined check shared Colton's wineglass. Every guest and staff member saw it, and Orson watched Colton's face. Colton pointed at me. "Arlo, remove him." Arlo waited for Garrett's nod. That small delay told me who gave the real orders. Arlo stepped around the table. "The apartment team called you protected. I see a tired engineer hiding behind Marks." Orson set down his glass. "If you're testing him, state the condition." Arlo glanced toward the retired fighter. 6 hits. If Tate remains standing, I stop. Orson looked at me. "He chose the number before seeing your answer. Remember that." Garrett's mouth tightened. Several guests looked from Arlo to my wrist. Orson had made the 6-hit count public. I had 25 marks. Arlo smiled at the count. "Let us find out what remains after 6 honest hits." His first jab came straight at my face. I slipped outside it and let the gauntlet strike empty air. One guest lowered his glass. A staff member failed to hide a smile. Arlo's smile disappeared. His clean opening had missed. Then he changed targets. He started with the staff. Arlo drove his gauntlet into the stone edge of the serving table. 2 broken slabs shot toward the workers carrying cherry cola. I crossed their path. The barrier caught the first slab across my shoulder. 1 mark burned. I knocked the second worker down before the next slab reached her. Gold caught that impact too. A second mark went black. 23 remained. Arlo had spent 2 of my defenses without touching me. One staff member had dropped a tray and frozen against the wall. I pushed her behind a stone column before facing Arlo again. The guests who had leaned forward stopped smiling. One pushed his chair away from the broken stone. Arlo looked pleased. I faced him. "You needed civilians for the opening?" Arlo rolled his reinforced wrist. "I needed you predictable." Then he came at me. His first punch hit the barrier over my ribs. A third mark burned. The second strike landed under my arm before I reset. A fourth vanished. Arlo turned through the third hit and drove the gauntlet into my chest. The fifth mark went dark. 20 remained. The 3 impacts pushed me across the floor and into the dining table. Plates jumped. Cherry cola rolled between the glasses. My ribs burned beneath the barrier. Gold blocked the lethal force. Momentum and pain still drove through me. Arlo opened his hands for the guests. 5 marks gone. He has landed nothing. One family guest started laughing. Orson stayed silent and watched my eyes track the gauntlet. Colton found his voice again. "That is the man you chose?" Colton began counting the black gaps around my wrist as if each one brought Corinne closer to him. 20 left, 19 after the next hit. Nerissa looked at Colton. Keep counting, it gives your rejection a rhythm. The family guests laughed at him instead of me. Nerissa's gold eyes returned to me. Stand, Tate, humiliate him properly. Strong emotional support. Very royal. I opened Fault Sight. Bright lines spread through Arlo's gauntlet, shoulder, stance, and the stone beneath his feet. The gauntlet hit a reinforced lattice under the leather, most of it carried force cleanly. One narrow fault ran from the wrist brace to the elbow hinge. Arlo saw my eyes focus and changed angles. He kicked the table toward the staff gathering near the wall. I pushed off with a second surge step. My leg shook harder, but I reached the table first. Arlo's next punch came through the moving furniture and hit the barrier at my back. The 6th mark burned. 19 remained. Arlo smiled. 6 gone. You are still on the floor. He had built the line for me. I drew one forge breath. Heat filled my chest and ran down my striking arm. Fault Sight held the bright seam through his gauntlet. I drove my fist into the line. The impact traveled through the brace instead of stopping at the leather. Arlo's gauntlet split from wrist to elbow. The force lifted his feet, turned him sideways, and dropped him across the broken serving table. Pain recoiled through my forearm and ribs. I landed on one knee with my hand numb. Arlo tried to rise once. The broken gauntlet folded under his weight and put him back on the table. Forge Breath had supplied the force. Fault Sight had chosen the line. I named the result Breakpoint Strike. Orson lifted one fragment of the shattered gauntlet. Did Nerissa teach you that strike? I shook, feeling back into my fingers. She taught the breath. I found the break. Orson dropped the fragment beside Arlo's hand. Then you lost to his own technique. Arlo's jaw tightened against the table. The guests stopped watching him and started watching me. A staff member retrieved the cherry cola he had knocked away and set it beside Nerissa again. She never looked at Gareth for permission. The room had watched 6 barrier marks vanish. It had also watched the family champion spend all 6 and lose anyway. Nerissa walked to Arlo and placed one sneaker on the shattered gauntlet. Your honest hits were expensive, Nerissa told him. Tate's answer was cheaper. Orson stood at the far end of the table. He looked at Arlo's exposed throat, then at the ruined brace. Orson addressed me. You saw the throat. You chose the gauntlet. I flexed, feeling back into my hand. I came for dinner. He can survive the lesson. Orson's expression changed from dismissal to interest. When Orson kept looking at me, Arlo stopped trying to rise. Colton backed away from Corinne's body. The guests who had laughed at the hoodie stopped looking at its price. Gareth remained seated. Gareth addressed me. You showed violence. Corinne's judgment remains unproven. Nerissa faced him. Then listen carefully. Colton is rejected. Your command means nothing. Keep every roof that charges obedience as rent. The staff member who had tried to take the cola brought another bottle to Nerissa without checking Gareth first. 2 more staff members stopped waiting for Gareth's nod. Gareth picked up his phone. Corinne's account screen changed in Nerissa's hand. Estate access vanished. Personal balances stayed frozen. A red line replaced the CEO suite access. Inside my pocket, the Maddox executive keycard went cold. Gareth looked at Corinne's body. Leave Tate here and all access returns. Walk out with him and you leave with the clothes you are wearing. A staff member approached with a small estate keyring and stopped beside Nerissa's chair. Gareth had made the loss immediate. Colton reached for the crushed ring box, desperate enough to rescue the proposal from a wineglass. Corinne, this is temporary. Say yes and I can restore everything. Gareth looked at me. Tell her to choose the apartment. Prove the family right about you. I faced Nerissa instead. The tether keeps us close. Your answer stays yours. Stay here, leave with them, or come back to Crescent Row. Every face turned toward me after Garrett's accusation. I left Nerissa's choice with Nerissa. Nerissa looked at the mansion, the dead keycard, and the people waiting for her to fold. Then Nerissa looked at my hoodie around Corinne's body. At Crescent Row, Tate tells me no, Nerissa declared. That makes it the only honest house you offered. Nerissa faced me. We return home. The staff member beside her placed the estate keys in Garrett's tray. Then she carried a case of cherry cola toward the front door for us. 3 family guests watched the staff follow Nerissa's choice. Nobody laughed at the drink again. The uncle who had ordered me to stand moved his chair away from Colton. Another guest handed the wineglass holding the crushed ring to a staff member. I pushed away from the table and my injured ribs locked halfway upright. Nerissa caught my forearm and pulled me the rest of the way. Do not collapse before we leave. It would improve Garrett's evening. I steadied beside her. Half rent still applies. Nerissa's mouth almost curved. Repair the couch first. Colton stared at the damaged hoodie. The mansion had lost to a broken couch. Garrett's fingers tightened around his phone. Then his voice changed. Gareth spoke to Corinne's body like he was addressing a frightened child. Corinne, hands folded. Count to 7. Corinne's fingers jerked into the folded position. Narissa's gold eyes widened as her arm locked. Gold vanished from Corinne's eyes. The body swayed. A frightened second voice spoke through Corinne's mouth. "Tate, please, do not let Gareth take me." The voice knew my name and sounded afraid. That kept me from calling it an act. The gold did not return, and Narissa did not surface. Losing her mansion should have simplified the living arrangement. That night, a second voice used Corinne's mouth and asked me to choose who belonged in it. The frightened voice stayed at the front long enough to cost me another barrier mark. Gold flashed around my wrist. Forced switch detected. Barrier marks 18. Stable control window 7 minutes. The body sagged against me while Gareth watched from the head of his ruined dinner table. I kept one arm around Corinne's waist and faced the voice using her mouth. I told the frightened voice, "Name yourself." The frightened voice swallowed. Corinne Maddox. That was a claim. Gareth had just proved he could force voices through her body. I needed an answer that belonged to my boss. "Wednesday's outage," I told the frightened voice. "What did I hide inside the rollback?" Corinne's brown eyes focused on me. "A recovery switch under the dead health check. Kurt refused the review, so you buried it where the next rollback could restore itself." Gareth stood. Corinne kept talking before he reached us. "You wrote one comment beside it," Corinne continued. "Stop paging Tate, he's been awake 31 hours. I deleted the comment before the client call. Only Corinne had reviewed that patch before I restored it. The memory proved the voice. The deletion proved she remembered the ugly part too. 6 minutes and 12 seconds remained." Gareth reached for Corinne's shoulder. I caught his wrist. "You used the phrase once," I warned him. "Try again," and I used the table. The table was already broken. My point survived. Gareth looked at my injured hand. "You are protecting a voice you hated an hour ago," I told Gareth. "I am protecting a choice you keep stealing." Corinne pulled her phone from the black hoodie. A termination notice filled the screen. Gareth had fired the overnight engineer who helped expose Kurt's counterfeit demo. The reason, read misconduct. The engineer's last public act had been standing beside me. One emergency audio channel still answered to the public CEO identity. The overnight engineer answered on the second ring. Corinne anchored herself before speaking. "This is Corinne Maddox. Your termination is withdrawn. Put the night team on speaker." Voices gathered behind the engineer. Chairs scraped. Someone raised the employee channel volume. Corinne continued. "Gareth Maddox does not control operations. Keep the launch systems under the engineers who protected the client." The overnight engineer answered, "Understood. The entire team heard you." Gareth's phone started vibrating across the table. One engineer had become a room full of witnesses before Gareth could silence the first. Corinne used the rest of her breath on me. "The black glass shard can cut Narissa away from this body," Corinne claimed. "Get me out before she returns." I looked at the hoodie pocket holding the shard. Corinne had proved she existed. The shard could still kill either soul. I told Corinne, "No." Corinne's face tightened. "Tate, she displaced me." I told Corinne, "You have 4 minutes, use them without ordering me." Corinne stopped arguing. She had spent 11 months expecting obedience from my exhaustion. She lowered her hand. Behind us, Colton raised his phone and started recording. Colton spoke to his camera. "Corinne is impaired. Tate Holloway is removing her from family care against direct instruction." The staff member carrying our case of cherry cola opened the front doors for me. 2 more staff members stepped away from Gareth's path. Colton had a camera, I had a body choosing the exit. I guided Corinne toward the doors. Gareth tried one word from the childhood phrase. Corinne's knees buckled. I pulled her close and covered one ear with my hand. The staff member slammed the dining room doors between us and Gareth before he finished the sentence. Gareth shouted through the doors at the staff member, "You are fired!" The staff member kept both hands on the handles until we reached the front steps. At the front steps, the control timer fell under 1 minute. Corinne gripped my sleeve. "Do not let Narissa erase me," I told Corinne. "Then give me reasons to protect you that do not come from your title." Corinne looked toward the case of cola, then back at me. "I kept the recovery switch because your code worked. I removed your name because credit made you harder to control." She had finally admitted what she did. The timer reached 0. Corinne blinked at the open front doors. Did the engineer hear me? She had forgotten the last 30 seconds. The forced switch had taken a mark and erased the edge of her memory. "The whole night team heard," I told her. Relief crossed Corinne's face before the gold returned. Gold returned to Corinne's eyes. Narissa took the front with one hard breath and shoved away from me. Narissa looked at Gareth's closed doors, then at my wrist. "You allowed that thief into control." I told Narissa. Gareth forced the switch. Corinne used it. Narissa touched the hoodie pocket where the shard remained. "Ignore her next request. She would cut me out and call it rescue," I answered Narissa. "Corinne said the same thing about you." Narissa's mouth hardened. I pointed toward the road. "Both stories stake claims until actions catch up. We are going home." Narissa looked at the mansion she had rejected, then followed me toward Crescent Row. By Saturday night, Colton's recording had reached every phone Hank owned. He had titled the clip, CEO Abducted by Employee, and put my hand on Corinne's wrist in the thumbnail. Hank stood inside our damaged apartment with a delivery bag and a charging cord. He wore the expression of a man regretting every roommate choice. Nerissa sat on the broken couch with gold in Corinne's eyes. Hank looped the cord loosely around Corinne's left wrist. New rule. Gold eyes means Nerissa. Brown eyes means Corinne. Whoever speaks names herself first. Nerissa examined the cord. You label an empress like damaged luggage. Hank pointed at the broken window, door, table, cabinet, and couch. The luggage has a documented history. I left the cord in place. At noon Sunday, the gold drained from Corinne's eyes without Gareth speaking. Corinne took the front and looked at the wrist cord. Hank leaned over the kitchen counter. State your name before requesting food, violence, or rent relief, Corinne answered. Corinne! Water! Her hand reached for the water. Nerissa's habit closed Corinne's fingers around a fresh cherry cola instead. Corinne took one sip and recoiled. This tastes like melted candy and battery acid. Hank pointed at the brown eyes. Identity confirmed. Nerissa called it a potion and finished 6. The cola was a ridiculous test. It worked faster than a lecture. Corinne placed the bottle far from herself and looked at me. Give me the executive keycard. I can still reach people who will listen. I set the disabled card on the broken table. 7 minutes do not buy back 11 months. Corinne stared at the CEO stripe. It is mine. The company printed your name on it, I told her. Nerissa put it in my hand. Gareth killed the access. The card stays locked until both of you stop using authority as a weapon. An order reached Corinne's lips and stopped. Then she pushed the keycard back across the table. Keep it, Corinne told me. I made you disposable because exhausted workers were easier to control. I knew what Kurt was doing. I rewarded it. Hank lowered the damage invoice and stopped joking. I faced Corinne. Fear does not erase what you did. Saving one engineer does not settle the bill. Corinne held my gaze. I know. 3 hard knocks hit the ruined door. The family driver stood in the hall with 2 movers, a replacement lock, and an empty dolly. The same black sedan blocked the delivery lane outside. The driver held up Colton's abduction clip. Management accepted the family's capacity claim. We are removing Ms. Maddox and replacing this lock. One mover rolled the dolly across our threshold. Corinne stepped in front of it. Brown eyes stayed clear. Corinne told the movers, I am Corinne Maddox. I refuse family transport. This apartment is my chosen residence. The driver looked at me. He coached that answer. Corinne grabbed the dolly strap and tied it around the broken couch arm. Then remove the couch. It has caused more damage than Tate. Hank raised one finger. Objection. The couch has counsel. The driver ordered the movers forward anyway. One mover reached for Corinne's sleeve. I caught his wrist before he touched her. You came for a lock, I told him. Do not turn it into a medical bill. Corinne's control timer dropped under 30 seconds. Gold flooded her eyes. Nerissa took the front and planted one hand on the loaded dolly. I am Nerissa, she announced. I reject removal too. The movers pulled. The dolly did not move. Nerissa bent its handle down until both movers let go. The driver reached for the replacement lock. Hank slapped the apartment invoice onto the lockbox. Window, door, sprinkler, chairs, cabinet, unauthorized lock attempt, blocked delivery lane. Your family now owes the apartment more than royalty does. He added the mover's wasted trip while the driver watched. Nerissa lifted the bent dolly and rolled it back into the hall with one hand. The movers followed it, fast. The driver tore a suspension notice from his folder and pressed it beside our door. Lobby access ends Monday. The entry light at the end of the hall changed from green to red. He had failed to remove either voice, so the family attacked the lock instead. Hank folded the invoice and tucked it under the sedan's windshield wiper before the driver escaped. The family left with an empty dolly, a bent handle, and a larger bill. Inside, Nerissa saw the keycard on the table. She reached into the black hoodie and removed the black glass shard. Nerissa placed it beside the keycard. Corinne asked you to use this against me. She did, I answered. I refused. Nerissa closed her fingers around the shard. Then take it before I reconsider your usefulness. I put my palm over both objects. 3 rules. Name the speaker. No forced switches unless the body is dying. No one gets cut out on the other's story. Nerissa looked at my hand. You expect an empress to surrender her only weapon. Corinne surrendered the card. Your turn. Nerissa looked at the shard, then at the broken couch she had chosen over Maddox Ridge. Her fingers opened. I put the shard in my inner pocket with the disabled keycard. Neither woman got to aim my hand. Nerissa leaned close enough for the gold in her eyes to fill my view. Betray this arrangement and I will break more than the couch. Add it to Hank's invoice first. Hank slid the paper onto the table. Pre-authorization helps. The consent truce survived its first argument. That evening, Nerissa fell asleep on the broken couch with one hand around an empty cola bottle. I reached past her to pull the suspension notice from the wall. Gold flashed from her fingers. The notice split down the center. The wall behind it gained a clean cut too. Nerissa woke with my arm braced over her shoulder and Corinne's face inches from mine. The front door opened at the same moment. Hank stopped with a delivery bag in each hand. I asked for speaker labels. I did not ask for forbidden couch geometry. I stepped back. Her sleep defense attacked paperwork. That sentence made the geometry worse, Hank replied. Half of the cut notice slid to the floor. A black wafer remained stuck behind it. The same black chevron insignia marked its center. I pulled the tracer free. Brown replaced the gold before Nerissa finished cursing the notice. Corinne took the front and gripped the wrist cord. I am Corinne. That routing stripe belongs to Garrett's family security account. The tracer blinked once in my hand. My laptop chimed from the kitchen. One extraction notification flashed and vanished before I reached it. Someone had just confirmed our address. Gold returned as Nerissa took the front. She looked at the tracer, then at the arm I had pulled away from her. You leaned over this body while I slept, Nerissa accused. Hank set down the bags. Excellent. The scandal survived the clue. At 2 Monday afternoon, my laptop chimed again. A message from Grandpa Mode filled the screen. Someone paid for a protective extraction of Corinne Maddox from Crescent Row. The contract names you as the abductor. I typed that Colton's story was false. Grandpa Mode answered immediately. I took the contract before Palisade could hand it to someone worse. Problem, I am already at your door. 3 knocks hit the damaged wood. The handle turned before Hank reached it. The person behind Grandpa Mode was a young woman holding an extraction contract with Corinne's face on it. She stepped through our damaged door at 2 Monday afternoon and aimed one heel at my throat. Her name was Fiona Kestrel. She was enhanced, fast, and roughly 40 years younger than the gruff account that had ordered me around online. Fiona kept her phone raised. Colton's abduction clip filled the contract screen. Tate Holloway, Fiona warned. Move away from Corinne. Nerissa stood beside the broken couch with gold in Corinne's eyes. Nerissa anchored herself. I am Nerissa. Your rescue is rejected. Fiona looked at the wrist cord, the ruined apartment, and the keycard shape under my jacket. The contract says he controls your access and keeps you inside a 50-foot range, Fiona replied. The range keeps this body alive, Nerissa snapped. Tate keeps arrogant strangers alive when I would prefer efficiency. Fiona shifted her weight. I recognized the attack before her shoulder moved. She drove through the doorway with an enhanced sidekick. I used one surge step and let her heel pass my ribs by an inch. The burst woke the tremor in my right leg. Fiona landed beside the damaged table and turned without losing balance. Good movement, Fiona observed. Bad custody story. She struck again. I caught her forearm. Fiona rolled through the grip, hooked my injured side, and threw me across the couch. The broken armrest found my ribs. Hank watched from the kitchen with a cherry cola case held against his chest. Hank, my roommate and worst possible witness, shouted, Grandpa Mode, you still lead with the right elbow when you were angry. Fiona's head snapped toward him. That voice had bullied us through late-night games for 2 years. Hank recognized the command cadence before I trusted my own ears. Fiona released my sleeve. How do you know that account? I stood carefully. Left lane. Her eyes narrowed. Grandpa Mode always called left lane before taking the right exit. The tactic mostly punished anyone listening. Fiona feinted left from habit. I moved right and caught her wrist before the real strike started. Her expression changed. I reminded Fiona, you told me the left lane was sacred. Fiona tried to sweep my legs anyway. She was still trying to win. Fault sight flashed for 1 second. A bright line ran through her planted knee. Command pulse tightened behind my tongue. 1 hostile target. 3 heartbeats. The same target got 1 use that day. I met Fiona's eyes. Stop. Her body locked in the middle of the sweep. First heartbeat, I removed the contract phone from her hand. Second heartbeat, I stepped away instead of driving breakpoint strike into the knee fault sight had already marked. Third heartbeat. Fiona regained motion and finished the sweep into empty air. She attacked again from the opposite side. I called, left lane. Then I stepped into the right side opening we had used on mine 100 times. Fiona changed the strike halfway through and missed me. Hank pointed from the kitchen. That is the same move you used after yelling at us about a virtual fence for 40 minutes. Fiona stared at him. The fence lost us the match. You drove into it, Hank replied. Fiona lowered her hands by 1 inch. That humiliating detail had done more than a password ever could. She looked at her uninjured knee, then at the phone in my hand. You could have broken it, Fiona admitted. Nerissa crushed a full cherry cola can behind me. The pop sprayed the wall. Nerissa faced Fiona. His restraint is not yours to admire. Fiona looked from the dripping cola to me. Does she always do that? Hank answered. Only around furniture, enemies, and women who compliment Tate. Nerissa's gold brightened. Hank retreated behind the refrigerator. Useful instincts had finally arrived. I held up Fiona's contract screen. It contained one photo from the family dinner and one frame from Colton's video. The instruction was blunt: remove Corinne Maddox from Crescent Row and keep Tate Holloway away during transport. The screen listed no medical contact, neutral destination, or consent check. The contract called kidnapping protection and hoped the font handled the rest. Fiona saw me reading. I took it because Grandpa Mode gives me access to private protector work. The client claimed Corinne was impaired and you were using the tether. The client knew the tether existed, I pointed out. Fiona's eyes returned to the exact 50-foot language. Corinne's body shifted beside us. The gold faded. Corinne took the front and gripped the wrist cord before speaking. I am Corinne. Tate did not abduct me. Gareth stripped my access after I rejected Colton. Fiona stared at the brown eyes. Corinne continued. Nerissa and I share this body. Tate keeps both of us alive. Fiona looked at me. Your custody story just added an empress, I told Fiona. That is why I did not lead with it. Corinne's control held for less than a minute before Gold returned. Nerissa took the front. You have heard both voices reject you. Leave. Fiona reached for her phone. The kitchen window exploded first. A black glass bolt hit Nerissa over the heart. I crossed between them. The barrier caught the bolt and burned one mark. 17 remained. 2 Palisade contractors came through the broken window while a third drove the apartment door off its temporary brace. The lead contractor wore the black chevron insignia openly. He looked at Fiona. The lead contractor ordered, Kestrel, step aside. Orson will hear if you refuse the handoff. Fiona's face went still. You sent a second team before I reported. The contractor lifted a second contract screen. Your fee doubles if you hand over the body and forget Holloway. Fiona looked at the number. It was large enough to repair Crescent Row twice. Then Fiona looked at the woman who had rejected extraction and at me standing on a shaking leg. Fiona knocked the second phone out of his hand. You paid for obedience. Hire a dog. The contractor answered with a cable launcher. The hooked cable wrapped around Nerissa's waist and yanked her toward the hallway. Gold peeled from Corinne's shoulders as the line pulled against the tether. A second mark burned. 16 remained. I drew one forge breath and used surge step. My legs shook hard, but I reached the cable before Nerissa crossed the range line. Vault sight showed a bright seam through the hook hinge. I drove breakpoint strike into it. The hook split. Pain snapped back through my forearm. The contractor swung the launcher into my ribs before I recovered. The barrier took the impact. A third mark went black. 15 remained. Fiona hit the contractor from the side and put him through the ruined door. The second contractor threw a black glass knife at Hank. Hank ducked behind the cherry cola case. I moved into the line. Gold caught the knife across my back. A fourth mark burned. 14 remained. Hank looked at the knife on the floor, then at the punctured cola case. They killed 6 bottles, Hank announced. Nerissa, you now have personal motive. Nerissa picked up the case and launched it into the contractor's chest. He hit the kitchen wall under a rain of cherry cola. Royal vengeance came carbonated. The lead contractor recovered in the hallway and drew a short black glass baton. Fiona blocked his first strike. The baton released a gold-shearing pulse through her guard and toward Nerissa. I caught the second swing with the barrier. The fifth mark burned. 13 remained. 5 chances it disappeared in under 2 minutes. The lead contractor smiled at my wrist. 13. The field chief said you would spend them on bystanders. He was right, I told him. That still leaves you in my apartment. Fiona swept his knee. Nerissa caught his collar. I removed the baton before either woman argued over who broke him. The third contractor tried the window. Hank kicked the broken chair into his ankles. The contractor fell across the sill, and Fiona dragged him back by the coat. Hank pointed at Fiona. Grandpa Mode finally protected the left lane. Historic growth. Fiona shoved the contractor face first onto the wet floor. I regret every game night. 3 contractors stayed down. None of us looked clean. My right leg trembled against the floor. My forearm had gone numb again. Nerissa's borrowed body showed a dark line under the hoodie where the cable had tightened. Fiona noticed all 3 injuries. She took the contract payment screen, turned it toward the contractors, and canceled her acceptance in front of them. The payment vanished in front of all 3 contractors. Fiona stood between Nerissa and the door. Grandpa Mode was Orson's old account, Fiona told Hank. I kept it because clients trusted an old man's name. Hank looked wounded. I accepted tactical abuse from a branding decision. Fiona glanced at him. You still ignored the left lane. The lead contractor looked up at her. Your grandfather will hear you betrayed a paid extraction. Fiona took the contract phone from me and placed it on his chest. My target refused extraction, Fiona answered. You attacked anyway. That made the contract dirty and you stupid. Nerissa stopped reaching for Fiona's throat. That counted as progress. I crouched beside the lead contractor. Call your field chief. Tell him Corinne is secured and I am restrained. He laughed through a split lip. Why would I help you? Fiona bent his thumb toward the call button. Because Tate stopped me from breaking a knee. I have restraint to spare. The contractor made the call. Arlo answered on speaker. Arlo, Gareth's Palisade chief, sounded angrier than he had looked under the broken dinner table. The contractor reported, target secured. Holloway restrained. Arlo replied, keep Holloway beyond 50 feet for 1 hour. Do not let either voice control the body during transport. The apartment went silent. Fiona looked at the exact 50-foot language on the contract screen. Palisade had known the tether before Colton posted the clip. I leaned toward the phone. Your recovery team keeps explaining the crime before finishing it. Arlo stopped breathing for 1 beat. Then Arlo snarled, Tate, I asked Arlo, your gauntlet recover? The contractor beneath Fiona closed his eyes. His boss was cooked and still taking questions. Arlo's voice hardened. The family launch is Friday. You will bring Corinne, or we remove everyone around you first. The call ended. Arlo had given the separation order. Gareth remained the name above him, still unconfirmed by a direct order I had heard. Fiona stood and faced me. My grandfather owns an amber core. It can stabilize voluntary control between 2 souls for about 90 seconds. Nerissa's eyes narrowed. Orson Kestrel, the old fighter at dinner. Fiona nodded. He is my grandfather. He watched you spare Arlo after you broke him. He also thinks Tate is living off your name. Your grandfather has poor vision, Nerissa replied. His fists compensate, Fiona warned. A system line opened across my view. Resource trait available. Suspend command pulse for 24 hours. Restore 3 barrier marks. 13 marks remained. Arlo had just promised more attacks. Command pulse had stopped Fiona in 1 word. Orson's challenge would be easier with it. Nerissa touched the dark cable bruise under the hoodie. The shared body twitched under her hand. Both women would pay for the next hit. I accepted the trade. The pressure behind my tongue vanished. 3 black gaps around my wrist filled with gold. 16 barrier marks remained. Nerissa stared at the restored ring. You surrendered command for protection, I told Nerissa. 3 more chances to keep this body alive were worth one day without making anyone obey. Fiona heard the answer and stepped to my side before speaking. She hauled the lead contractor upright and shoved him toward the other 2. Carry Arlo a message. Tate is under my protection until I decide he deserves less. Nerissa crushed the empty cola can again. It was already flat. She crushed it anyway. Fiona looked at the metal disc. That sounds like jealousy. Nerissa stepped closer. That sounds like one warning. I moved between them before the alliance became a property dispute. Fiona called Orson. The retired fighter answered after 1 ring. Fiona told Orson the core was needed and that the command trick I had used on her was offline. Orson replied, good. 3 rounds, 1 clean strike earns the core. I took the phone. And if you fail to stop mine? Orson gave a short laugh. Bring your hands, Tate. Leave the excuses at Crescent Row. Orson Kestrel placed the amber core on a wooden stool and gave me 3 rounds to touch him cleanly. 1 clean strike earned the core. Command pulse had 12 minutes left offline. Orson was Fiona's grandfather and the expert who had watched Arlo fall. He stood barefoot inside Kestrel Training Hall with padded guards on both forearms. He looked at my bruised ribs, shaking right leg, and the cheap athletic tape Hank had wrapped around my forearm. You beat 1 hired champion while hiding behind Corinne's marks, Orson told me. Now earn something under your own name. Fiona stepped beside the ring. She had attacked me Monday and switched sides before the floor dried. Fiona crossed her arms. He stopped me without breaking my knee. He also gave up the command trick to protect Corinne. Orson looked at his granddaughter. Admiration makes students dishonest. Fiona smiled. Jealousy makes grandfathers loud. The attendants around the training floor suddenly found the walls fascinating. Nerissa stood outside the ring in Corinne's black hoodie. Gold filled her eyes. Nerissa anchored herself. Tate, if the old man insults you again, strike the mouth first. Orson glanced at her. You call him a disciple? Nerissa folded Corinne's arms. When he is useful. Orson nodded toward the ring. Then I will test your teaching too. Orson raised 3 fingers. 3 rounds, 1 clean strike. Barrier marks stay for emergencies. If they trigger from my hand, you fail. 16 marks circled my wrist. The amber core sat 10 feet away, glowing faintly inside a clear case. Fiona had given me 1 sentence about it. Voluntary shared control could hold for 90 seconds. That was enough to make it valuable and dangerous. The first bell rang. Orson left his center open and watched my right leg. I read the bait, surge step. I used the burst anyway. I entered the opening. Orson closed it before I finished the step. Orson shifted half a foot, caught my elbow, and rolled me across his hip. I hit the mat before the tremor finished climbing my calf. No barrier mark burned. His control was exact. Orson looked down at me. Borrowed speed, predictable entry. I stood. Round 1 bought your opinion. Expensive little speech. Fiona covered a laugh with her hand. Orson heard it. His eyes sharpened. The second bell rang. This time, I walked forward. Orson jabbed at my injured ribs and watched my guard. I let the first touch pass and opened fault sight. Bright lines crossed the hall. One deep fault ran through Orson's left shoulder. It was old, ugly, and ready to tear if I drove force through it. He saw my eyes stop there. Orson rolled the injured shoulder forward and offered it. I read the offered shoulder as a test. I shifted away from the free target. A thinner fault ran through the clasp of his right forearm guard. I stepped toward that instead. Orson blocked my straight punch with the guard and slammed his other palm into my chest. The impact lifted me from the mat. I landed on my back with my lungs empty. The guard had taken my knuckles. Orson's palm had taken the round. Fiona gripped the ring rope. Nerissa's gold eyes narrowed. He saw something. Orson flexed his right hand once. The movement looked normal. 2 rounds, Orson announced. No clean strike. I stayed down long enough to pull one forge breath through my ribs. The fault sight headache started behind my eyes. I shut the skill before it stole the final round. Orson offered me a hand. I stood without taking it. His smile showed one edge. Pride after 2 losses. I told Orson, your guard is still holding. Celebrate while it can. The third bell rang before he answered. Orson came forward first. Orson kept the injured side protected and drove the right guard toward my face. I gave him the line. His guard met my forearm. I drew one forge breath and reopened fault sight for 3 seconds. Then I drove breakpoint strike through the clasp I had touched in round 2. The guard absorbed the visible hit. Orson's left palm hit my ribs at the same moment. Pain folded me around the strike. I crossed the ring on my back and stopped under the ropes. The third bell ended with me on the floor. Orson remained standing. One attendant started closing the amber core case. Fiona shouted, "Wait!" Orson raised his right arm to wave her off. The forearm guard split from clasp to rim. 2 pieces fell onto the mat. Orson's hand stayed halfway up. His fingers refused to close. Breakpoint strike had traveled through the guard before his palm put me down. The clasp held for 3 seconds. Then, the damage arrived. Orson looked at the numb arm. Then he looked at me. I pushed myself upright against the rope. Clean enough? The attendant stopped closing the case. Fiona stepped into the ring and lifted one broken guard piece. He touched you through the block. Orson's eyes moved to his left shoulder. You saw the old injury, I answered. Yes, Orson pressed. You could have ended the test in round 2. I told him, I needed one clean strike. Your old wound was a gift you never offered. One attendant reopened the ambercore case. Fiona smiled at Orson. Orson had called me a parasite. Now his own equipment was lying at my feet. He was cooked with excellent posture. Orson bent, picked up the second guard piece with his good hand, and placed it beside the amber core. Tate Holloway earned the strike, Orson announced. Open the case. One attendant opened it again. Orson removed the amber core and put it in my palm. The core was warm and lighter than it looked. The core stabilizes voluntary shared control for 90 seconds, Orson explained. Both souls must choose the same action. Fiona stepped beside me in full view of her grandfather's attendants. Nerissa approached the ring. Nerissa looked at Orson's broken guard, then at me. Your restraint produced a better humiliation. I approve. Orson flexed his numb fingers. Your disciple talks too much, Nerissa answered. He learned that alone. The defiance system opened across my vision. Command pulse restored. Command pulse returned after I had earned the core without it. Orson had no command trick to blame. I closed my hand around the amber core. A black glass blade cut through the clear case and continued toward Corinne beside the ring. The barrier caught the first impact around Corinne's body. 1 mark burned. 15 remained. Arlo Fitch stepped through the side entrance with 4 Palisade contractors behind him. Arlo, Gareth's field chief, wore no reinforced gauntlet this time. His right arm was wrapped from wrist to elbow. The black glass blade in his left hand matched the weapon from my apartment window. He looked at the core in my fist. Put it down, Arlo ordered. Corinne stays unstable until Friday. Orson moved between Arlo and the amber core stool. You entered my hall with a blade, Orson told him. Lead with fewer people. The attendants who had obeyed Orson all afternoon closed the main doors behind Palisade. Arlo looked at them. Maddox money built half this network. One attendant dropped a Palisade visitor badge onto the floor, then asked the money to open the door. Arlo pointed his blade at Corinne's body. Kestrel, your granddaughter took a contract. Finish the handoff. Fiona stepped beside me. I canceled it after your men tried to separate a woman who refused. Arlo's mouth tightened. Then you chose Holloway. Fiona raised both hands. Correct. Try to survive the update. The contractors moved. 1 rushed Fiona. 2 aimed black glass batons at Nerissa. The 4th moved for the side door and reached for the core. I handed the amber core to Nerissa. Corinne needs the front, I told her. You keep the strength. Nerissa's gold eyes stayed on Arlo. The original owner fears that weapon, I answered. She also remembers it. Let her choose. Arlo threw the blade. I stepped into its line. The barrier caught the edge over my shoulder. A second mark burned. 14 remained. The amber core flashed in Corinne's palm. Gold receded from her eyes without disappearing from her hands. Corinne took the front. Brown eyes tracked the spinning blade while gold stayed wrapped around both hands. Corinne anchored herself. I am Corinne. Low left, then reverse. The blade changed direction exactly where she called it. Nerissa's gold tightened around Corinne's fingers. Corinne caught the flat of the blade between both palms and turned it into the floor. Black glass buried itself beside Arlo's shoe. Arlo stopped. Corinne stared at the cut pattern in the wood. Then Corinne looked at him. You were at my wreck, Corinne told Arlo. You cut the driver's door with that blade. Arlo's blade hand stalled. That memory should have stayed buried, Arlo replied. That answer confirmed it. Arlo had been at the crash. Gareth was still the man he served. I had not yet heard Gareth give the crash order. A contractor swung a baton toward Fiona's head. I intercepted it with my forearm. The gold barrier took the soul-shearing pulse. A third mark burned. 13 remained. Fiona broke the contractor's stance and drove him into the ring post. Orson caught another contractor by the coat and threw him out of the ring. He blocked exits and bodies. He left Arlo to me. Arlo pulled the blade free from the floor and attacked Corinne again. Corinne read the opening from memory. Right shoulder, Corinne called. Gold drove the turn. The shared body slipped inside Arlo's strike and drove one gold-backed palm into his wrapped arm. Arlo staggered. Gold flooded both eyes as Nerissa took the line. Your technique is repetitive. Corinne remembers your cowardice. Corinne took the front again before Arlo reset. Tate, the blade pulls the souls apart on contact. Arlo lunged at the amber core instead of her chest. I opened fault sight. One bright fault ran through the floor rack holding the training weights. Arlo's heel crossed it. I used surge step, reached the rack, and kicked its support through the fault. The rack dropped across Arlo's path. He cut through the steel with the black glass blade. The severed top section fell toward two attendants near the wall. I moved under it. The barrier caught the weight across my back. A fourth mark burned. 12 remained. The impact drove me to one knee. Arlo used that second to reach the side exit. Fiona went after him. Orson caught her shoulder. He wants pursuit away from the core, Orson warned. Arlo backed through the doorway with the damaged blade in hand. Arlo pointed at Corinne's body. Friday's public launch. Gareth will make Corinne speak in front of 2,000 people, bring the core, and hear the truth from her own mouth. Then he cut the door rail and dropped it between us. The remaining contractors saw Orson's attendants closing around them. They lowered their batons instead of following Arlo. None followed him. Corinne still held the front with gold around her hands. While the amber core still glowed, Nerissa spoke through the shared control. Gold brightened around Corinne's hands. Corinne saw the reversal before I did. Corinne answered as brown returned to both eyes. Nerissa gave me enough strength to stop it. The amber core went dark after 90 seconds. Neither soul had been forced out. Corinne tucked the core into the inner pocket of the black hoodie before her hand began to shake. Orson faced the contractors. Carrier injured. Tell Palisade the core belongs to Tate. The contractors lifted their injured and moved. Fiona picked up the black glass chip broken from Arlo's blade and handed it to me. It matched the shard Nerissa had surrendered at Crescent Row. The chip matched the shard in my pocket. Arlo had carried the same black glass at the wreck and into this hall. Corinne's phone buzzed in the black hoodie. A public launch invitation filled the screen. 2,000 guests and employees were listed. Gareth controlled the stage feed through the Maddox family office. Corinne's live address sat at the center of the schedule. I accepted the invitation. Hiding would give Gareth the body, the company story, and every camera Colton loved. I wanted the stage while every screen still belonged to him. The next fight had a guest list, a stage, and every employee who had watched me get humiliated. Gareth planned to use Corinne's own voice against me. Corinne's brown eyes faced 2,000 employees and guests when she read Gareth's first line. Tate Holloway exploited my condition and kept me against my will. The sentence filled every screen in Maddox Tower. Gareth stood beside her with one hand closed around the black family seal. It warmed whenever he used the childhood phrase. The amber core glowed beneath Corinne's black hoodie. It gave her roughly 90 seconds of stable control. I entered the stage with 12 barrier marks. Gareth's speech got none of them, so I removed my employee badge. Gareth looked across the launch floor. Tate, you may answer the accusation. I dropped the badge beside the luxury podium. A cherry cola can already sat there, small and cheap under the launch's luxury lighting. I quit, I told him. Then I turned toward the exit. Gareth had built a stage for my defense. Walking away ruined the script before Corinne finished reading it. The first badge hit the floor behind me. The overnight engineer Gareth had tried to fire stepped out of the launch control row. He placed his badge beside mine. Tate saved our weekend and Corinne saved my job, the engineer announced. I am done taking orders from the man who attacked both. A second badge landed. The payroll analyst who had shown 80 green bonuses walked away from Gareth's reserved seats. She dropped her badge on top of the first two. My team follows the person who protected our pay, the payroll analyst told the cameras. The third choice came from a junior engineer near the client display. He removed his badge, unplugged his launch headset, and carried the headset to me. You built the recovery switch, the junior engineer told me. We can build somewhere that respects sleep. 3 choices became 12. Gareth hit the blacklisting control on the launch screen. Every departing badge turned red beside one warning: no severance, no reference, family network blocked. Then Gareth pointed at the payroll analyst. Security, drag her back to her station. 2 security employees entered the aisle. The night team closed around the payroll analyst before either employee touched her. The first client representative stepped between them and laid her contract folder across the aisle. Move her, and my launch leaves with her. One security employee looked at the red badges. The other looked at the workers who had built the product. Both stopped. Gareth had activated every thread at once. The room answered with one blocked aisle. He raised the family seal and turned back to Corinne. Colton moved beside Corinne with a fresh ring box in one hand. He had brought a second ring to the same rejection. Optimism had left the building. Delusion bought another box. Colton pointed at the cherry cola on the podium. Look what Tate reduced you to. Cheap clothes, a damaged apartment, and that trash drink. Come with me and take your life back. Corinne's fingers twitched toward the ring box. Gareth tightened his hand around the family seal. Corinne, Gareth commanded. Hands folded. Count to 7. Corinne's hands locked together. The amber core flashed under the hoodie. Brown stayed in her eyes, but gold gathered around both wrists. Corinne fought for the next word. Tate, remove me from the wreck. Gareth leaned toward her microphone. Continue the statement. Corinne's shoulders shook. The family seal darkened under Gareth's thumb. The family seal pulsed again. Corinne's knees bent. She caught the podium with one hand and stayed upright. Gareth lowered his voice so the microphone carried every word. Read the statement, Corinne. I can restore your home after you cooperate. Corinne looked at the black hoodie, then at the workers leaving their seats. The home you stripped? Corinne asked. Gareth's fingers tightened around the seal. The home the family owns. Corinne's mouth opened under the command. The next prepared line appeared on the teleprompter. Tate Holloway manipulated my medical condition for access and money. Corinne read the first 2 words. Then she bit the inside of her cheek hard enough to draw blood. The teleprompter kept scrolling. Corinne did not. Gold spread over her knuckles as Nerissa lent strength without taking the front. The launch screens replayed the crash footage behind her. Colton's edit showed me dragging Corinne from the sedan, carrying her toward Crescent Row, and grabbing her wrist outside the family dinner. The clean cut in the driver's door stayed outside the frame. Gareth's footage framed a trapped woman and a guilty employee. The workers had already paid for his clean stories. I stopped walking and faced the stage. Corinne forced her hands apart. Tate pulled me out because I was not breathing, Corinne told the room. Arlo Fitch cut my driver's door. I recognized his blade on Tuesday. Arlo stood behind the side curtain in a dark palisade jacket. Every camera turned toward him. Arlo's wrapped right arm tightened against his side. His left hand moved toward the black glass blade under his coat. Gareth snapped, "Cut her, microphone." The night team ignored him. Hank stood beside the control rail with my roommate grin and 3 phones taped to a portable battery. Hank raised one phone. Main feed is mirrored to the employee channel. The internet remains difficult to threaten. Gareth's smile died. Corinne looked at Arlo on the live screen. He told me that memory should have stayed buried. Arlo drew the blade. Drawing the blade confirmed Corinne's accusation in front of every camera. The audience pulled back from Gareth. 2 client representatives left his side. A family guest near the front lowered her event badge and stepped into the worker aisle. Colton opened his ring box anyway. Corinne, you are confused, Colton insisted. Let me take you somewhere safe. Gold flooded Corinne's eyes. Nerissa took the front while the amber core still held both women together. Nerissa looked at Colton's ring. You brought another one. Colton extended it toward her. This can still be repaired. Nerissa put Corinne's sneaker on the box and crushed it against the stage. The hinge snapped. The ring skittered beneath the cherry cola can. Nerissa faced the cameras. Colton is rejected again. Record it slowly for him. The launch floor laughed at the family-approved fiancé. Colton reached for Corinne's arm. Nerissa caught his fingers and put him on one knee beside his broken ring box. Tate lives with me because I chose his home, Nerissa told him. You remain outside it because I chose that too. Colton folded, publicly, beside a crushed ring and a $2 drink. Workers were still carrying their badges toward the exit when Gareth pointed at Arlo. Arlo, Gareth ordered into the live microphone, separate them now. Arlo threw the black glass blade at Corinne's chest. I used surge step. My right leg shook when I reached the stage, but the barrier caught the blade first. 1 mark burned. 11 remained. The blade spun into the podium and split the cherry cola can. Foam sprayed across Colton's white shirt while he was still on one knee. He had survived 2 proposals and lost to the beverage. Arlo ripped a lighting brace from the stage wall and kicked it toward the payroll analyst. I crossed the falling metal. Gold caught the brace across my shoulder. A second mark burned. 10 remained. The payroll analyst stayed after I took the lighting brace. She dragged 2 guests behind the display wall and pointed them toward the open aisle. Our overnight engineer pulled the junior engineer away from Arlo's blade, then came back for me. Both turned back toward the stage for the next person. Gareth's former workforce had started protecting one another, which made the stage harder for Palisade to control. The payroll analyst rolled clear, grabbed my discarded badge, and shoved it into my hand. "You drop this on your terms," she told me. "Keep it that way." I closed my fingers around the badge, then threw it onto Gareth's podium. A Palisade contractor came through the side curtain with a black glass baton. He swung at the overnight engineer who had been first to walk. I blocked the pulse with my forearm. The third mark went black. 9 remained. The engineer caught the contractor's sleeve. 2 more workers drove him into the stage rail. Their badges were gone. Their nerve had arrived. Arlo stepped over the broken podium. "You keep spending marks on employees who already quit." I forced my right leg steady. "They quit you. I still know their names." Arlo glanced at the workers closing around the stage. That tiny pause told me the badge walkout had changed his math too. Arlo cut through the podium and came at me through the falling panels. I opened fault sight. Bright fractures ran through his damaged blade, wrapped right arm, and the support under his left foot. I kicked the weak support. Arlo dropped 1 level as the stage panel folded. His blade missed my ribs and sliced through Hank's battery cable instead. The main launch feed died. Hank lifted a second phone. "Backup feed. I planned for rich people." A contractor threw a black glass bolt at the phone. I stepped between them. The barrier took the bolt across my back. A 4th mark burned. 8 remained. Hank kept filming from the floor. The employee channel showed Gareth's seal, Arlo's blade, Colton's broken ring, and workers fighting the security team that claimed to protect them. Gareth grabbed Corinne's wrist and pressed the family seal against the cord Hank had tied there. Gold tore away from Nerissa's shoulders. The amber core flashed hard enough to show through the hoodie. I reached for Corinne. Arlo drove his wrapped arm into my injured ribs. The barrier caught the impact. A 5th mark burned. 7 remained. Pain still folded me over. Gold blocked lethal force and left every bruise. Arlo hooked the back of my neck and threw me off the stage. Workers caught me before my head reached the floor. The junior engineer handed me the launch headset. "Tell us where to move." I pointed toward the stage doors. "Keep the aisles open. Nobody chases into a blind corridor." They chose my direction because I had protected their pay and lives. Nerissa broke Gareth's grip and drove him backward. Corinne took the front for 1 second. Brown eyes found me through the crowd. "Tate," Corinne warned, "the seal is pulling us apart." A Palisade cable shot from the side platform and wrapped around Corinne's waist. I used surge step again. My leg nearly failed, but I caught the cable before it dragged her behind the curtain. A second cable wrapped my wrist and discharged black glass through the tether. The barrier flared around both of us. A 6th mark burned. 6 remained. I struck the cable hinge with breakpoint strike. The hinge cracked. My numb forearm went dead to the elbow. Arlo used that opening to drive the flat of his blade into Corinne's side. Gold peeled from the shared body. The forced separation pulse consumed the 7th mark. 5 remained. Nerissa took the front and caught Arlo's wrist. Corinne called the blade angle from inside the shared control. Together they turned the edge away from Corinne's body. For 1 second, Arlo was trapped between the woman he had tried to erase and the empress he had failed to remove. I stepped toward him. Gareth slammed the family seal against the podium. Every light in Maddox Tower went black. Emergency shutters dropped between the stage and the launch floor. One struck the floor in front of me. Another cut the workers away from Corinne. The overnight engineer shoved his shoulder under the first shutter before it sealed. 3 workers joined him. The metal dropped another inch and trapped his sleeve. I grabbed the edge with forge breath and held it. The payroll analyst cut his sleeve free with a broken badge clip. The shutter slammed down after his arm cleared. Gareth had tried to divide the room. The workers had spent their last safe seconds keeping one another whole. Hank's phone kept streaming in the dark. The screen showed Palisade contractors dragging Corinne toward a service lift while Arlo covered them with the blade. I hit the shutter with forge breath. Metal bowed and held. On the other side, Corinne's body crossed 50 feet. A gold timer opened across my vision. Tether breach. Body lock. 45 minutes. Barrier marks. 5. The service lift doors closed around Corinne, Gareth, and Arlo. Badges still covered the dark launch floor behind me. Hank's phone still carried Gareth's attack to the employee channel. Workers he had threatened were already forcing their hands under the shutter. Behind it, the lift carried Corinne farther away. My timer lost its first second. I had 44 minutes and 59 seconds to take her back. The last reward the Defiance system offered me was permanent control over both women. I reached that offer with 37 minutes on the tether and 5 barrier marks left. The workers forced the launch shutter high enough for one person to crawl under. The overnight engineer wedged a broken badge into the track. The payroll analyst braced the frame while Hank pushed his backup phone through the gap. A surface camera showed Corinne below us. Black glass cable fixed her wrists to a steel rail. Gareth held the family seal against the wrist cord Hank had tied. Arlo waited at the freight gate. The timer stayed in my vision. Body lock, 37 minutes and 4 seconds. Barrier marks, 5. I dropped to the floor. The junior engineer caught my injured shoulder. The shutter falls when you clear it. Then come with me, I told him. Nobody gets trapped alone. We crawled under together. The shutter slammed behind us. One steel service gate stood between us and the freight bay. A Palisade contractor held the manual release on the other side. Gareth's voice came through the gate speaker. "Junior engineer," Gareth called. "Close the route. I restore your job, severance, and family references tonight." The gate display lit with the engineer's old employee profile. His red blacklist warning turned green. Restored salary, full severance, and an approved reference filled the screen. The engineer stopped beside me. Gareth kept selling. "Holloway has no company, no clients, and no protection left. Touch the release and choose a future." The junior engineer's thumb hovered over the green profile. The payroll analyst saw it and said nothing. The contractor started lowering the gate. "I use command pulse. Release it," I ordered. The contractor froze for 3 heartbeats. His hand opened. The junior engineer pulled Kurt's red emergency pager from his pocket and jammed it into the gate track. "That pager owned my nights," the engineer shouted toward Gareth. "It does not close this gate for you." Arlo answered with a black glass bolt through the opening. The bolt aimed at the engineer's chest. I crossed the line. Gold caught it across my back. 1 mark burned. 4 remained. The junior engineer grabbed the gate instead of running. Workers reached through the shutter behind us. The payroll analyst caught one side. 3 engineers caught the other. Together they forced the gate over Kurt's crushed pager. The pager cracked. The route stayed open. The gate display turned the engineer's profile red again. He watched the salary and reference disappear, then shoved the gate higher. "I chose," he told Gareth. Fiona arrived from the guest stairwell and swept the frozen contractor away from the release. Orson came behind her, one arm still stiff from our duel. "We hold the stairs," Orson told me. "You take the field, Chief." The freight doors opened. Gareth stood inside the lower service bay with Corinne and the family seal. Arlo stepped between us. 31 minutes remained. Corinne's brown eyes were open, but her fingers had stopped moving. Gold flickered beneath the skin and failed to reach the surface. Gareth pressed the family seal against the wrist cord Hank had tied. "Hands folded," Gareth commanded. "Count to 7. Corinne's fingers jerked. Nerissa forced 1 gold line through the locked hand. The seal split the color down the middle. Gareth looked at me. "You should have accepted the check at dinner." I moved 1 step closer. Arlo lifted the damaged blade. "Did you order the wreck?" I asked Gareth. Gareth glanced at Hank's phone, then he smiled anyway. "I ordered Arlo to stop Corinne's car and recover her before she left family control," Gareth answered. "You were supposed to remain an employee and walk past." Corinne heard him directly. Her brown eyes lifted through the body lock. "You ordered Arlo to stop my car." Gareth kept the seal against her wrist. "I ordered you recovered before you embarrassed the family." Nerissa forced gold into Corinne's fingers. "You call chains recovery because cowardice needs paperwork." The nearest Palisade contractor stood beside Corinne's rail. He looked at her locked wrists, then at Gareth. "You told us this was a medical recovery," the contractor said. Arlo kept the damaged blade aimed at me. "You were paid to follow orders." The contractor opened Corinne's cable lock. Black glass dropped from her wrists. Then he stepped out of Arlo's line and kicked his baton away. Arlo turned the blade on him. Orson caught the contractor by the coat and yanked him clear. Arlo's edge cut the black chevron badge from his chest instead of opening his throat. The contractor looked at the severed badge on the floor. "That is how you protect your own people?" 2 Palisade batons lowered behind him. That choice reached the other contractors before Hank's phone reached the rest of the company. Hank raised the live screen. The crash order was already moving through the employee channel. 1 client account ended its launch session. Gareth pointed at Hank. "Break the feed." Arlo moved first. He slashed toward Hank's phone, then reversed the blade at my ribs when I crossed the line. The barrier took the black edge. A second mark burned. 3 remained. The impact threw me into the freight door. My injured ribs locked. Arlo followed with his wrapped right arm and drove through the same line. The payroll analyst yanked Hank behind the service cart before the hit landed. That saved the mark. I caught Arlo's wrapped wrist and used the door for balance. You ordered the crash and still needed a launch speech, I told Gareth. That is a lot of production for one coward. Gareth pressed the family seal harder. Corinne cried out. A black line ran from the seal across Corinne's wrist. Gold pulled away from her shoulders in 2 separate streams. The tether threw 1 mark into the split. A 3rd mark burned. 2 remained. The timer dropped below 12 minutes. Arlo drove his knee into my ribs and broke my grip. Then he shoved the damaged blade toward Corinne's chest. I crossed the last open space. The barrier caught the soul-shearing pulse between us. The 4th mark burned. 1 remained. Gold around my wrist had become a single thin line. Corinne stood 58 feet away. Arlo stepped between me and the safe radius. He dragged the broken blade across the freight floor. Black sparks cut a line between Corinne and me. 1 mark, Arlo announced. 1 hit, then the body belongs to the family. The overnight engineer moved toward my blind side. I stopped him with 1 hand. You opened the route. This part is mine. The engineer looked at my emptying ring, then at Corinne's locked hands. He backed 1 step and stayed close enough to catch anyone who fell. Arlo pointed the blade at the engineer. The workers stayed. 8 feet and Arlo separated me from the safe radius. My vision filled with the defiance system. Crown command available. Claim both souls. Tether stabilized. Obedience permanent. The offer was ownership. Corinne would obey. Nerissa would obey. The body would live. I had spent 11 months under someone else's clock. No. The prompt broke. A new line burned across my vision. Defiance condition met. Choice preserved at personal cost. Unbound crown unlocked. Consent transfers protection. Gold spread across my wrist. I moved before Gareth finished staring. Arlo swung at my head. I used surge step and slid inside the blade. My right leg shook hard enough to drag, but 1 burst carried me past him. 50 feet became 49. The tether timer stopped at 9 minutes and 14 seconds. Corinne pulled 1 breath into the locked body. I held up the wrist carrying the last mark. Corinne, I called. Nerissa, do you accept the last mark? Corinne took the front for 1 second. Brown eyes fixed on me. I accept, Corinne answered. Gold filled the edges of her eyes. Nerissa spoke through the shared control. Give it freely, Tate. I opened my hand. The last barrier mark left my wrist. Gold crossed the gap, wrapped around Corinne's left wrist and closed over the cord Hank had tied. 0 remained on me. The body lock released. The transferred mark covered both soul colors at once. Corinne's brown eyes stayed present, while Nerissa's gold wrapped both hands. Protection followed their shared choice. Corinne's fingers opened. Arlo saw my empty wrist. He smiled. He had spent every fight counting the wrong thing. Arlo drove the black glass blade under my raised arm. No barrier appeared. The edge cut across my side and pinned my jacket to the freight door. Pain hit clean and immediate. Arlo twisted the blade and faced his contractors. This is Holloway without gifts. The contractor who had opened Corinne's cable did not move back to him. Arlo pulled harder, trying to drag me down the edge. I tore my jacket free at the shoulder and wrapped the loose fabric around the blade guard. The steel door held my back. The cloth trapped his hand long enough to ruin the clean withdrawal. The junior engineer kicked a dropped baton toward me. I kicked it back toward the workers. Keep the route. I have his mistake. Arlo leaned close. No marks. I caught his blade wrist with my numb hand. No excuse. Fault site opened. The chip Fiona had broken from Arlo's blade left a bright fracture through the spine. Another fault ran through his wrapped right elbow where breakpoint strike had shattered the gauntlet at dinner. Arlo drove the strike too far past my guard. I pulled myself farther onto the blade's flat and trapped his left arm. 1 forge breath loaded my right fist. Breakpoint strike hit the fracture near the blade guard. Black glass split from guard to tip. The impact opened Arlo's left hand. I drove the broken guard into his wrapped right elbow. His right arm folded. The blade shattered across the freight floor. Arlo tried to headbutt me. I used the last strength in surge step, moved half a pace, and let him hit the steel door. Then I struck the fault his overextended left shoulder had opened. Arlo dropped on top of his own broken Palisade badge. He tried to rise. His wrapped right arm failed. His left hand scraped at the glass dust and could not lift him. He had counted my marks all night. Now both of his arms were useless. He was finished, live and face down on company property. Arlo's cheek hit the badge hard enough to crack its black chevron clip. The contractors saw the symbol break under the man who had worn it like a threat. The nearest contractor's baton lowered first. The Palisade contractors behind Orson stopped pushing. Arlo lifted his head. Finish the recovery. The contractor who had opened Corinne's cable removed his black chevron badge. Recovery ended when Gareth admitted the crash, he told Arlo. He dropped the badge beside Arlo's broken one. A second contractor lowered his baton. The others saw Fiona at the freight exit, Orson at the stairs, and their champion unable to lift either arm. Weapons hit the floor. Gareth raised the broken half of the seal. Double every palisade payment. Remove Holloway now. Nobody moved. The first contractor kicked his baton farther away. Payment clears after recovery. Recovery failed. Gareth had bought loyalty by the job. The job was face down beside him. Hank turned the phone toward Gareth. Your private security has left the group chat. Corinne flexed both hands once. She did not thank him. Stopping was the minimum. Gareth drove the family seal against Corinne's wrist and repeated the childhood phrase. Corinne's hands folded halfway. Nerissa's gold forced them open. Corinne took the front. I am Corinne. I choose this action. Nerissa wrapped gold around both hands. I am Nerissa. I lend my strength. They caught Gareth's seal hand together. Gareth pulled backward. The transferred barrier mark held around their wrist. Corinne turned his thumb. Nerissa supplied the force. The family seal cracked. One black line split across the family seal. Gareth tried the phrase again. Corinne broke the first word with her own name. Nerissa drove both hands down. The seal shattered against the steel rail. Black pieces scattered across the freight floor. The command pressure vanished from Corinne's fingers. Nerissa took the front and looked at my empty wrist, then at the blood spreading under my jacket. Nerissa's voice stayed level. You rejected command and gave away your shield. I pulled the broken blade from my jacket and dropped it beside Arlo. Nerissa continued, You stand as my equal, Tate. Gareth flinched. I almost did too. Corinne took the front long enough to catch my injured arm. Stay upright! We still need you! The broken seal lay between Arlo and Gareth. Arlo stayed down. Palisade weapons covered the floor. Gareth crawled across the floor and grabbed the largest seal shard. He cut his palm around it and pressed the shard into the broken seal base on the rail. Black light shot through the transferred mark. Corinne's body arched. Brown and gold split across her eyes. Nerissa forced one warning through clenched teeth. He turned the seal inward. Corinne grabbed my sleeve. The purge will leave one soul if we fight separately. Gareth stood with the shard buried in his bleeding hand. One body, Gareth told them. Choose who deserves it. Gareth had one shard left. He used it to force the final choice. The tether disappeared before sunrise. 1 week later, the boss who no longer needed me signed my lease anyway. First, Gareth tried to make sure only one voice survived long enough to choose. The purge moved before either woman explained it. Corinne's right hand shot toward the disabled executive keycard inside my jacket. Nerissa's left hand clawed for the black glass shard in the other pocket. Their shoulders pulled in opposite directions. The shared body hid both knees against the steel floor. The transferred barrier mark cracked around the cord Hank had tied. Gareth pressed the largest seal shard through his bleeding palm and into the broken seal base. Corinne's eyes split down the center. Brown held on the left. Gold fought on the right. Nerissa forced the first warning through clenched teeth. Separate resistance feeds the purge. One soul can seize the body and survive. Corinne took the next breath. Shared resistance could erase both of us. Fight each other, and one woman lived. Choose together, and both risked disappearing. I had no mark left and no command I was willing to use. Gareth looked at Corinne's brown eye. Give me Nerissa. I restore your shares, the estate, and Maddox dynamics. Corinne's hand shook against the rail. Gareth continued. You can repair your reputation. You can return to the life Tate stole. Corinne looked at my discarded employee badge on Hank's live screen. Then Corinne looked at the workers surrounding the service bay. You owned my life, Corinne answered. Tate stopped you. The brown side of her gaze steadied. Gareth turned toward the gold eye. Nerissa, take the body. Corinne is weak, guilty, and afraid. You have no reason to share a throne. Gold spread across both hands. Nerissa answered through clenched teeth. A body is not a throne. Gareth flinched. The shard pulled harder. The shared body pitched toward the rail. I stepped toward her. Gareth swung the broken family seal at my chest. Stay back. The choice belongs to the stronger soul. I caught his wrist. The choice belongs to both of them, I told him. Gareth drove the shard closer to Corinne's body. Black lines crawled across the transferred mark. The gold ring around her wrist started cracking. Nerissa's voice came from the gold side. Tate, command us together! The offer hurt more than Crown Command had. One order could force alignment. One order could also poison every choice after it. I released Garrett's wrist and faced the shared body. I will protect whatever you choose, I told them. You choose it. Corinne closed the brown eye. Nerissa closed the gold one. For one heartbeat, the body went still. Both hands opened. Neither reached for the authority or weapon again. Gareth smiled at the silence and raised the shard. Corinne opened both eyes first. Brown returned across them. Corinne named herself. I am Corinne. I choose coexistence with Nerissa. Gold gathered around the brown irises. Nerissa spoke through the shared control. I am Nerissa. I choose this body with Corinne. The amber core inside the hoodie flashed once. Corinne guided the right hand. Nerissa supplied strength to the left. Together they caught Gareth's shard hand. The purge reversed course and climbed the family seal. Gareth tried the childhood phrase. Corinne answered with her own name before he reached 7. Nerissa crushed his thumb against the shard. A bright fracture opened through the black glass. I opened fault sight. The shard had one remaining fault from the first seal break. It ran from Gareth's palm to the steel seal base under his hand. Gareth saw my eyes focus and pulled the shard away. I stepped back. Gareth lunged through the opening at Corinne's chest with the cracked shard. I caught his elbow and turned the strike into the steel seal base. Corinne moved at the same time. Nerissa's gold drove both hands against Gareth's wrist. The shard hit the seal base along the fault. Black glass shattered through Gareth's fingers. The purge reversed. Dark light ran up his arm and ripped the childhood phrase out of Corinne's locked hands. Gareth flew backward, hit the rail, and dropped the broken seal base. The transferred mark flashed white. Then, it dissolved. The gold tether line between Corinne and me vanished from my vision. No timer replaced it. No mark count returned. Corinne stood. Nerissa took the front and walked toward the far end of the service bay. 50 feet passed. Then 60. Corinne's body stayed upright. The tether was gone. Nerissa could have kept walking. She crossed back through the vanished 50-foot line and stopped beside me. Nerissa took my injured arm before my knees made the decision for me. Distance no longer commands this body. Good, I told her. Then coming back counts. Nerissa's grip tightened once. The system stayed silent. She stopped beside the freight doors and turned back. Gold filled both eyes, sharp and alive. I remain, Nerissa announced. Corinne took the front before the relief could become soft. Brown eyes returned. So do I, Corinne confirmed. Both voices had survived. Corinne reached into the black hoodie and removed the amber core. The stone had carried 90 seconds of borrowed stability. It was dark now. Corinne placed it in my palm. This belongs to you. Our next switch belongs to us. Gold crossed her eyes by choice. Nerissa took the front, rolled Corinne's shoulders once and returned control. Corinne came back without a timer, a command phrase, or memory loss. The wrist cord Hank had tied stayed around Corinne's left wrist. They kept the label because clarity remained useful even after danger stopped forcing it. Gareth pushed himself off the rail. Blood ran between his fingers where the shard had broken. Every palisade weapon remained on the floor. Arlo still lay across his broken badge. Gareth looked at me instead of them. You want freedom? Gareth demanded. Take Maddox Dynamics. I will name you CEO tonight. The offer would have sounded impossible 1 week earlier. I removed the disabled executive keycard from my inner pocket. Corinne had surrendered it. Nerissa had trusted me to hold it. Gareth had spent the week offering control as if it were the only reward anybody respected. I tossed the card at his feet. Gareth kicked the keycard toward me. Your name can be on every floor by morning, Gareth promised. The workers already follow you. Take the title and make their loyalty official. The overnight engineer looked at me over Hank's raised phone. The payroll analyst watched too. Nobody answered for me. The workers watched without telling me what to choose. My time is already mine, I told him. Gareth stared at the keycard. Then he grabbed a narrow seal fragment from the floor and rushed me. His last attack had no plan left, just ownership with a sharp edge. Fault sight showed the fracture before he completed the first step. I shifted outside his shoulder and caught his wrist. Gareth tried to force the fragment toward my throat. I turned his hand into the broken seal base. The fragment snapped. The recoil drove his knuckles into the rail. He dropped to one knee beside the keycard he had offered as a crown. I kept his wrist against the steel. Arlo fought for you, I told Gareth. Palisade took your money. Colton carried your camera. The workers carried your company. I released him. I told Gareth, call any of them. Gareth looked around the service bay. Nobody moved. A Palisade contractor kicked his dropped badge away from Gareth. Orson stayed at the stairs. Fiona stayed at the freight exit. They contained the room and left Gareth's answer to the people he had used. The overnight engineer picked up the red emergency pager and carried it past Gareth without looking down. The payroll analyst collected the worker badges from Hank's bag and returned them as personal property. Company permission had ended. Clients on Hank's feed ended their launch sessions one by one. Family guests walked out through the open service gate. Gareth had controlled a family office, a company stage, a security force, and Corinne's conditioned hands. Now he had a broken seal and nobody willing to answer. Colton arrived from the stairwell with cherry cola foam still dried across his shirt. He saw Arlo down, Gareth kneeling, and Corinne standing without the tether. Colton adjusted his jacket and tried to switch sides before anyone invited him. Corinne, I knew Gareth had gone too far, Colton claimed. I can help remove him and restore your public position. Corinne took the front. Corinne looked at the man who filmed her crash recovery and pushed the abduction clip. He had brought 2 ring boxes to one refusal. You used my condition to advertise yourself, Corinne told him. Leave. Gold filled Corinne's eyes. Nerissa took the front and pointed at the crushed ring still visible on Hank's launch replay. You proposed twice and lost to a couch, Nerissa told Colton. Do not attempt a third defeat. The workers laughed. Colton's second ring rolled from his pocket and stopped near Nerissa's shoe. Nerissa looked down at it. Colton followed her gaze and tried to recover the ring before the workers noticed. The payroll analyst noticed first. She nudged the ring toward the pile of abandoned Palisade badges. The launch feed caught the entire little crawl. Colton had arrived as the safe fiancé. He left chasing jewelry across the floor while the woman he claimed walked past him. Colton looked at Gareth for support. Gareth could not stand. Colton backed through the freight doors and left him there. The rejected fiancé had finally found a useful instinct. Gareth reached for Corinne. You cannot run the company without the family. Corinne stepped outside his reach. Corinne answered. Watch me give away the part you use to control people. She took Hank's live phone. The employee channel still carried the service bay to thousands of workers. Corinne anchored herself. This is Corinne Maddox. Mandatory 90-hour schedules end tonight. Every unpaid overtime hour approved under my leadership will be repaid from my personal shares. The payroll analyst stopped sorting badges. Corinne continued before gratitude could soften the scene. I created the schedule that made Tate and others disposable. Gareth exploited it. Kurt enforced it. My responsibility remains mine. Corinne handed the phone back to Hank. I told Corinne, that pays the workers. It does not buy forgiveness. Corinne nodded once. Understood. The overnight engineer stepped beside me. Where are we building next? Before I answered, two workers rolled the genuine demo unit through the freight doors. It was the same unit Colton had failed to destroy. The junior engineer carried the launch headset beside it. They pushed both pieces past Gareth. The client lead entered the service bay from the open gate. Two members of her launch team followed her. She took the far handle of the demo unit from an engineer. My launch follows the people who kept it alive, the client lead told Gareth. Her team took the other side. The unit, the headset, the workers, and the client moved toward the freight exit under their own power. I looked at the people who had walked away from salaries, references, and Garrett's blacklist. Worker-owned, I told them. Equal shares. Paid overtime. Nobody owns another person's weekend. The payroll analyst lifted the bag of discarded badges. Put that on the first wall. Hank raised his battery pack. I still claimed snacks and aggressive invoice management. Fiona looked at him from the exit. Nobody gave you management. Hank pointed his camera at Gareth on the floor. Performance review says otherwise. The workers laughed and kept the unit moving. Corinne remained beside Gareth for one final choice. Gareth looked at his sister. Restore the family access and I can contain this. Corinne looked at the disabled executive keycard beside the broken seal. No, Corinne answered. Then Corinne walked after us. Nerissa took the front halfway to the gate. Gold eyes found me through the workers. Nerissa touched the cut beneath my jacket, checked the blood, and tightened her hand around my sleeve. You are injured, Nerissa observed. I told Nerissa, I noticed. Nerissa supported my bad side without asking permission from the room. Do not collapse before we leave. It would improve Garrett's evening. I leaned enough weight onto her to make the answer honest. Half rent still applies. Nerissa's mouth curved. The tether is gone. Your bargaining position weakened. I told Nerissa. Then you can live somewhere else. Nerissa kept walking beside me. Good answer. 1 week later, the Crescent Row lobby light was still red. Corinne's body arrived with a case of cherry cola and a signed lease. The family driver followed one step behind her, still treating our doorway like a family asset. Hank and I met them beside the blocked reader. A building clerk held out a reinstatement notice. Access returns after a $300 fee and family clearance. The family driver who had brought the movers stood beside the desk. The family does not clear this residence. Brown eyes faced him. Corinne took the front and placed the lease on the desk. I am Corinne Maddox. I signed this residence by choice. The driver pointed at me. He still has to remain close. Corinne walked away from me. 50 feet passed, then 60. Her body stayed upright. Gold filled her eyes by choice. Nerissa took the front and walked back alone. I am Nerissa. Distance no longer binds this body. I still choose this house. The driver reached for the lease. Nerissa put one finger on his hand and pressed it flat against the desk. Your family tried removal. Both voices refused. Stop shopping for a third answer. Hank placed the sliced suspension notice beside his wrist. The black chevron tracer was still taped behind it. Then Hank opened the apartment invoice. Unauthorized movers, replacement lock attempt, blocked deliveries, hidden tracer, $300 of imaginary reinstatement. He taped the black chevron tracer to the top page before the clerk could pretend the lockout had been neutral. He moved the fee from our column to the family's. The driver watched the bill grow again. The driver tried to pull his hand away. Nerissa let him after he took the invoice. The building clerk looked at the tracer, the lease, and the woman who had crossed the old radius without falling. The clerk deleted the fee. The lobby light turned green while the family driver held his own bill. The driver left without Corinne, the lease, or the tracer. Upstairs, our apartment still carried history. New glass filled the window. Our front door closed if Hank lifted it slightly. The couch arm remained cracked because Nerissa called replacement an admission of defeat. A set of studio keys sat on the repaired kitchen table. Beside them, the payroll analyst's overtime repayment notice showed the first cleared deposit. The overnight engineer had sent a photo of his own payment with one message: "Weekend bought back." I put the notice under the studio keys. Hank placed the original damage invoice in the center of the table. Corinne set the case of cherry cola beside it. Brown eyes stayed present. Corinne put the lease on top of the invoice. "I signed as an equal tenant. 1/3 rent. Company authority ends at the apartment door." I checked the page. Hank had added a second page beneath the lease. The house rules were short: name the active soul before speaking. Company authority ended at the apartment door. Whoever broke furniture paid before blaming the furniture. Corinne initialed all three. Nerissa had crossed out the last sentence once, reconsidered the invoice, and initialed it too. Corinne had also added one line in her own handwriting. "No unpaid orders." Corinne looked at me. "The restitution came from my shares. The studio investment stays separate unless the workers invite it." "Good," I told her. Corinne did not argue. Gold filled the shared body's eyes. Nerissa took the front and lifted the case of cherry cola onto the table. Nerissa placed a second signature beneath the house rules. Her handwriting looked like it had conquered paper in a previous life. "The tether is gone," Nerissa declared. "I still choose this house." I pointed at the rent amount. "Then choose 1/3. Nerissa looked at the damaged couch. "I accept equal rent. I reject that furniture." Hank slid the damage invoice toward her with a pen. "Royal damage deposit," Hank told Nerissa. "Pay before declaring war on the couch." Nerissa read the total and looked at me. "Your roommate remains insolent," I told Nerissa. "He also controls utilities." Nerissa signed the damage deposit. Hank took the first cherry cola from the case and placed it beside her copy of the lease. Corinne had once owned my schedule. Nerissa had once called me servant. Both women signed after the body no longer needed me to survive. The tether was gone. She stayed. Rent was due Friday.